Welcome back to another episode of Grizzly True Crime. My name is Gisela K, and today we're going to slay the rest of this Moab Police Investigative Report. We're starting on page 61 today, and it's out of 102 pages, so it's going to be a little bit of a long one, but I hope you'll stick it out with me because this is a lot of work. Yes. I enjoy making it for you guys, but this is looking at line by line the entire document. I have the rest of it on a playlist. There's already, I think, 4 parts of it. So if you haven't checked that out yet, please do start there. All right, let's get started. Thank you so much for joining me here today. If you are new here, then I hope that at some point during this video, you'll consider subscribing. We deep dive over here, which you Grizzlies already know. If you are already a Grizzly, which means you have subscribed and hit the bell, then welcome back. It is always nice to see you. So let me put this on the background for you so that we can go through this together. As always, I'm going to put myself right here. So as you can see, we're starting on page 61. We last ended on page 60, and we are looking at the Moab Police Investigative Report response. So the Moab Police had a report, and then it was investigated. The August 12th altercation between Brian Laundrie and Gabby Petito when they were pulled over, and there was body cam footage and all of that. The way that the Moab Police handled it, that was investigated, and this is now their response to that investigation. Okay, so officer interview notes. Assistant Chief Palmer interview notes. The questions are in regards to your phone call conversation with Officer Pratt while he was on scene with the DV incident between Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie. There will also be questions regarding report approval process as well as any other knowledge you may have as it relates to this case. When you spoke with Officer Pratt while he was on the scene, did you record your conversation or was there anyone else around that heard the conversation? It was not recorded, and if anyone was there, I don't know. Potentially my wife, she was the only person around. He stated he was actually home on paternity leave when he received the phone call. Officer Pratt called Assistant Chief, Officer Pratt called Assistant Chief Palmer and gave a brief synopsis of what happened and said he told Gabby there was nothing he could do as it was all written in statute. Officer Pratt, the last thing I can do is call a supervisor where there is such a minor. This was like a slap fight and injuries from like a fingernail. I just don't know if it's worth the whole domestic thing or not, if it's going to get us in trouble if we don't do it this way. Assistant Chief Palmer, no, I don't. To that, I do not remember. I don't know if I really have much of a response to that. I'd imagine based on Officer Pratt's response on 3, we probably had a brief conversation on the two parties' willingness, obviously, to cooperate, and if there was interest in charges, or not. If they were willing to separate, I know that was part of our conversation. After I received the synopsis, I think it's important to note that my initial is Officer Pratt is a seasoned officer. He has more years of experience than I do. I refer to him state statutes, look at the code, see what fits, and then our policy as well. Now 3, Officer Pratt. Well, they don't want to, but unless I get some kind of permission some other way, we have to separate ya. Assistant Chief Palmer responds, probably would have said yes, they should be separated, but that again I would refer to state statute and policy as far as making a determination. I've never been a supervisor that tells somebody do this or do that, especially when I'm not there. And then it says, can't understand. Call me and give me a synopsis. I'm probably just going to err on the side of policy and state law, right? Isn't it err? Anyway, err on the side of. Anyway, 4, Officer Pratt. As far as domestic assault charge, what do you think about that? Assistant Chief Palmer. Kind of the same thing. I'm not there. Review state law and policy and make a determination based on what you're seeing and what you think. 5, Officer Pratt. Well, Assistant Chief Palmer. I've did what I would of respond to. Hard to understand. 6, Officer Pratt. Do the whole thing or not? Assistant Chief Palmer. Don't know what I would have responded. So this is just going over the questions that they asked the officers, right? And their response. 7, Officer Pratt. But is there a way of not doing something like this? I mean, it's so minor. Assistant Chief Palmer. I would imagine we did have a conversation about the injuries and that they were minor, and that it sounded like a tough decision to make, but they're the ones on scene. I'm not. Officer Pratt. It's hard to say, right? Assistant Chief Palmer. Question mark. They say question mark, but he's probably like. Number 9. Officer Pratt. I'm going to go reread the statute and just see if it fits, or if there's a way it doesn't fit, and if I can find a way that it, cause it really is the spirit of the law is being lost on this one. It really is. So let me see what I can find, and if nothing else, then we'll have to separate them, whether she likes it or not. Assistant Chief Palmer. I said, yep, that's what I would do. Reread, review the statute and policy, and make a decision. Number 10. I told him that Officer Pratt talks to Officer Robbins, and he tells Officer Robbins that Assistant Chief Palmer told him that if it fits, it fits. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Assistant Chief Palmer. Right. 11. What is the report approval process with the Moab City Police Department? This situation, so you have Officer Robbins, who is on field training, and Officer Pratt, who had been a field training officer. Ideally, the field training officer takes a look at their report before it's submitted. They go over it, the report is then submitted, and comes to the first line supervisor, which generally is a sergeant. We were in the middle of a promotional process, a little bit different. From there, the initial supervisor, the first line supervisor, reviews the report. If corrections need to be made, they reject it back to the officer. If no corrections need to be made, and they felt that the report was complete, they would then approve it, and it goes to our records. They do some reviewing there as well, and then obviously if it's an active case, it would go to whichever attorney it needed to go to. If not, then it's closed or no action was taken on it, and then that's it. Okay. 12. I asked what type of review records does on the reports. Records reviews the reports for completeness as far as all the boxes filled out and linking it to any other reports that they need to be. 13. I asked if the highest up reports are reviewed for content is with a sergeant. He confirmed this is accurate. FTO and or first line supervisor, which is a sergeant. 14. Do officers have access to body-worn camera video when preparing case reports? Yes. We run Axon, so if you're out and about, you have access through the app. Axon has an app. You can review it prior to it being uploaded to the server. Otherwise, after it's uploaded to the server, they would still have access. 15. Are you aware if there is any body-worn camera footage of the contacts with the witness? Not that I'm aware of, there's not. And that would be the initial response to Moonflower. I said, yes, the initial response to Moonflower, and then the follow-up to get the statement. He said not that he was aware of. It's so weird that they didn't wear any body cam, they didn't turn on their body cams when they spoke to witnesses outside of Moonflower. Number 16. Did you ever see any of the photographs of the injuries or driver's licenses that were taken by Officer Robbins? I did not. 17. Does Moab Police Department have victims' pamphlets to hand out for DV cases? And then he said for DV, yes. 18. Do you have anything that you would think was important to add? And he said, I don't think so. I think the body camera video shows kind of, the gist of our conversation. Like I said, I'm on paternity leave, and so I wasn't wholly, can't understand, but ultimately my recommendation was to review state statute and policy, which is exactly what happened, that they looked at the code and made a determination. Right, okay. Officer Daniel Robbins interview notes. How many years of law enforcement experience do you have, and how long have you been with Moab City Police Department? 5 months. FTO ended at the beginning of September. Probation lasts for a year. 2. Did you have access to your body-worn camera and dispatch call information when preparing your report? Body cam, yes. I didn't have the 911 call or anything like that. 3. What about dispatch notes? I don't recall. What system do you guys use? Now he says FatPot. Interesting. So on FatPot, what a name, are you able to see the dispatch notes? Some, not all notes get posted. Not all things are posted on there. We can't click on a link and hear the 911 call or anything. 6. Did you review your body-worn camera prior to or during the time you were preparing your report? I want to say yes, but I can't tell you yes for sure. I don't remember. I mean, it's been 3 months now, almost. Oh boy. That's the problem. When time goes on and on, right? It's been 3 months now, almost. 7. How many calls are you aware of that were made to dispatch regarding this incident? Just 1. 8. How many witnesses are you aware of regarding this incident? Did you speak to any of them? 1 witness I was able to make contact with. He wasn't sure the last name. I later found out that the witness I thought was the 911 caller was not. And so I'm going to say 2. Oh no, they're confused about how many witnesses they had and who was the witness and all that. 9. How were you notified about this incident? Dispatch, online reporting system, etc. He said, radio traffic. 10. Do you remember the general information that came out? Active domestic, both parties in the vehicle. Turned right off 100 North onto Main Street. They were headed northbound. They had a license plate and a vehicle description. 11. In your report, you state that this person observed Brian and Gabby arguing over a phone. Did you investigate this further by speaking with Brian or Gabby about it? No. What he saw, if I recall correctly, that they were having a verbal dispute, and he saw the aftermath that led up to them getting into the vehicle. He wasn't sure exactly what was being said. 12. In your report, you state that this person observed Gabby climbing into the van via the driver's side window. When and to who did this person report this specific information? He says to me on the day that I got his written statement. 13. The contact when you got the written statement, was that recorded? I really don't recall at the top of my head. 14. There's a chance it was though. I went on a long drive out to his house to go and speak to him, but I also know that I was there for a long time. I really don't recall. Okay, to me that sounds like they don't have a recording of that. 15. Would that be something they would still be access to if it was recorded? Yes. 16. As far as contacts you have as part of the job, is it normally something you would do or required to do is activate your body camera? He said, that's something I normally do. Why did they not do it? 17. You state that this witness said he was not entirely sure what it is he had seen, but feared the worst. You collected a witness statement from them that explained a lot what he said he observed. What exactly was this person referring to when you put in your report he was not entirely sure what it is he had seen? Something that does come to mind that he said is he was concerned about it being a human trafficking type of thing. He was really wishy-washy about it. He wasn't sure if it was a couple of kids having a verbal argument. If it were, it went from best case scenario of the situation, of course, of somebody having a verbal argument, or worst case scenario. So he was worried about it being a worst case scenario. It's very interesting that that person thought it was a human trafficking type of thing. I mean, if we didn't know that Brian was her killer, wow, we'd speculate big time about that, right? Like, wait, what? And why do you say that? I wish we could interview these people. Hello, people. If you are watching this video and you are one of these witnesses, I mean, now that the case has come to a close, if you want to come forward and tell us what you saw and actually said, that would be pretty amazing, right? On my word. I wonder why they thought it's a human trafficking type of thing and why they thought that is worst case scenario, rather than worst case scenario being, this guy's dangerous, he's going to hurt Gabby, or, whoa, something doesn't look right, maybe it's TV. It's like, whoa, human trafficking, damn. 18. I clarified that this person wasn't sure about the big picture or circumstance was of the incident, but was sure of what he actually saw physically. Yes. In your report, you state Brian got into the van and Gabrielle had gone into a manic state. What is your understanding of what that means, and how do you know she did this? Ooh, here we go. Manic means they are not in the right state of mind. Aren't doing things that people would normally do, like crawl in through the driver's window across their boyfriend into her own van. Okay, never mind. And he said that she had been kind of in and out of those states throughout the last few days due to those arguments. The way he described it to me was that was the state of mind she was in when she climbed into the car. She climbed into her car because he was going to leave her behind without her phone, without her laptop, without her stuff, without her van. he hooked up a backpack to the back of the car and was going to go. So that is why she jumped in. That's emergency jumping in. Do you know how stressed she must have been jumping through that window? Do you think that she wanted to jump through that window? I don't think so. Oh, my word. But yes, if anyone was in a manic state, I'm not a psychologist. This police officer is not a psychologist. But no, I would say Brian was more the one in a manic state. Manic doesn't mean panic. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean behaving in a panicky way. But with Brian saying, oh, those flies have really been working her up. I mean, is that, when he said the way he described it to me that was the set of mind she was in when she climbed into the car. And that she was like that the last few days due to those arguments. Oh man, I hate that they believed Brian. Number 20. So as far as stating she went into a manic state, was that something that Brian actually said? Or is that something you concluded? Haven't sat down and watched my body cam. I don't remember. Oh my word. Why have you not sat down and watched the body cam? This is international news at this point. I mean, me in the Netherlands, freaking, we're watching this body cam stuff, but now you haven't sat down and watched your body cam? I don't remember. I was also still on FTO and not very good at writing reports, so I'm probably guilty of possibly putting speculation in there. Wow. Number 21. In your report, you state Brian said Gabrielle, thinking he was going to leave her in Moab without a ride, went to slap him. As Gabrielle started to swing, Brian pushed her away to avoid the slap. As a result, Gabrielle off balance but still caught Brian's face with some fingers, causing some minor visible scratches. Do you recall what the actual information was that was provided to you by Brian? He says, no. 22. The reason I asked this, I reviewed the video in its entirety. So did we. It's on the playlist if you didn't see it. 3 or 4 times and took notes as I was going through, and it's the reason I asked the last question, was I never heard him saying anything about her being manic. As far as Gabrielle being scared that he was going to leave her in Moab, I haven't been able to find anything. I heard him say he was worried about her leaving him, but I haven't seen, and then he says, I might have mixed those up. 23. As far as the act of how the scratches happened and about her starting to swing and Brian pushing her away and she being off balance, and that's all things too I haven't heard. I got the injuries are there. There was swinging, whatever. But as far as the story of how it happened, I haven't been able to see that's, and then ... He says, I was trying to piece it together because their stories were all over the place, as I'm sure you saw. Yes, as are many DV cases, am I right? They weren't exactly, this event happened, this event happened, this event happened. This event happened, it was, whoa, he says a lot, huh? It was this event happened, and then 20 minutes later, this event happened. And then 3 days ago, this event happened. So I was trying to piece everything together. 24. In your report, you state, I observed some small scratches on Brian's right arm, and when I asked him about them, he supposed they must have happened when Gabrielle was trying to get his attention about me being behind them with my lights on. This, however, was not consistent with Gabrielle's statement, further suggesting her confused and emotional state. A. What exactly was not consistent with Gabrielle's statement? If I remember correctly, Brian said that she grabbed his arm, or she said that he grabbed his arm. Anyways, the conflicting stories where one said he was being hit in the shoulder and the other one said that his arm was grabbed and that's what caused him to swerve and hit the curb, something along the lines of that at least. 25. In your report, you document that Gabby had told you she hit him in the arm and his statement was that she pulled on the steering wheel. When you asked Brian about the scratches, he said they must have happened when Gabrielle was trying to get his attention about you being behind him. Gabrielle also said that she was hitting him. So as far as not being consistent, it's really not consistent with what Brian's stating happened, not with what Gabby is saying happened. He says, well, no response. No response. 26. You mentioned Gabby's confused and emotional state. What else do you recall Gabby being confused about? It didn't seem that she understood why we were there or the way that things could appear from the outside. She was obviously very emotional, crying, not wanting to talk to her mom on the phone. Not wanting to talk to her mom on the phone. She was on the phone with her mom for the majority of the conversations we were having. And yet I believe her mom said, from what I've read, that she didn't call her and they didn't know about this incident until the body cam footage came out after Gabby was missing. She just didn't seem fully coherent to the world. Not like she was intoxicated or under the influence, but her mind went into the black zone, so to speak. Like the black we have to fight back in law enforcement. What is he talking about? Worried about this guy's mental health. I am actually worried about this guy's mental health. Oh my word. Officer Robbins, my word. She just didn't seem fully coherent to the world. Not like she was intoxicated or under the influence, but her mind went into the black zone, so to speak. You know, like the black we have to fight back in law enforcement. Okay. 27. You state in your report, I do not believe the situation escalated to the level of a domestic assault as much as that of a mental health crisis. A. Please explain how you reached this conclusion. With the information I had at hand, and just since what I've learned since then, at the time, it seemed like someone had gone into a panicked state. See, he mixes up manic and panicked. And it was more emotional. I don't know what's going on, an overreaction to what they perceive directly in front of them. You mean a victim of trauma? You know, just because you have somebody with a hand up doing this doesn't mean they're attacking you, but the way it was being perceived was that they were being attacked. See, he's talking trauma talk. He's like, oh, she got triggered by something that wasn't even happening. Oh my word, this guy's gaslighting Gabby right now. I mean, if you know what I mean. It's just like, this sounds to me like gaslighting. Like, she might have seen this and this happening, but it wasn't actually happening. Hate it. And I think that's what ultimately caused the breakdown that day. With all the other fights they had told me about over the last few days or weeks or whatever it was. With what happened that day, I think that just kind of sent it over the edge for her. Wow, not for him, for her. I don't like it. And you have to remember, I'm going off of the information that I had that day. That's what it appeared to have been at the time. So he's basically saying Gabby went into a panic state, was more emotional than maybe the situation presented, and that sent her over the edge. Yeah, are you projecting again about your wife and stuff like that? Or what's going on here? This is like someone who has just a little bit of information about PTSD, but just a smidge, just a little bit. And then is using that to be like, oh, I know what happened here. Except this was very likely, of course, full-blown DV. Oh my word. It's not just a trigger, it's like actually happening. 28. How would you quantify the two? I was looking at trying to fix the problem and figuring out what the underlying problem was. No, that's not your job. That's a psychologist's job. That day, it didn't seem like it was an ongoing issue of assault, but an ongoing mental health issue that had occurred, and that's what caused the domestic. Not your job. Your job is to handle the domestic, according to the law. Not to think, what's the underlying cause here? And I wonder how long it's happened. And maybe she's just overly emotional, manic, triggered, panicked. No. Just stick to a checklist. They just need a checklist. That's what they need. Do they have checklists? I don't know. I'm relating that to my airline experience. I flew an Airbus, right? Airbus 320, 319, and then also the 340, 300, 600, right? 200, 300, 600. And we had a checklist. It's like, don't think for yourself. They didn't say that, but it's just like, if this happens, grab that checklist. You first work through the checklist. And then, if that does not work out at all, sure, in a major emergency, you would have to then think for yourself. But like, sounds to me like they need a checklist. We called it a QRH, a quick reference handbook. They need that. 29. If this incident was more of a mental health crisis, why did you not get them in touch with mental health professionals? He walked right into that one. That day was very, very busy. Oh, the busy card. Calls were stacking up left and right and mistakes were made. I didn't see their phone rings off the chain, did you? It completely slipped my mind. I didn't even think about it. Okay, so it slipped my mind and I didn't even think about it. Okay, it was the stress of that situation, the stress of everything else that was going on. It wasn't until I got off work that I went and put his palm up to his face, slapping. Whoa, dude. Okay, so you were like, man. Okay, but it's very busy. This sounds like a whole string of excuses. Like, why did you not do your homework? It was very, very busy. There were a lot of calls and I was very stressed, okay? And I don't know. And then you slap yourself in the face. Great. Questions from the body-worn camera. 30. At any point in the time during your interactions with Gabby, did you ever notice any injuries to Gabby? He said, if I remember right, she had a small scratch on one of her cheeks. Yeah, that she said was tender to the touch and burnt. 31. Did you ask her how she got there? I don't remember. I know that I didn't spend much time talking to her. Officer Pratt spent the majority of the time talking to her while I was dealing with Brian. 32. Did you ask Brian about the scratch on Gabby's cheek? Again, I don't remember. Yeah, you mean you didn't. I do remember something about, I don't know who told it to me. I don't know when I found it out. I know that it was in that time frame of this event, of course. One of them told me about Brian grabbing her face, and that's what he used to push her back by. You mean he used her face to push her back? That's a weird way to word that. It's a weird way. I also said, I know that it was in that time frame of this event, of course. I told you I got a red flag with this officer. I'm allowed to have a red flag with this officer. I'm like, woo. He makes me nervous. I can't ignore my gut instinct, okay? Okay, 33. When you provided dispatch the names and dates of births of Brian and Gabby, from watching the body cam, you only asked for 29s when you asked for that information. Does dispatch typically, if you only ask for 29s, will they let you know about 27 information? He said only when it's requested. 34. The first one with Brian, you asked about 29 information. They got back to you and said they couldn't find anything and they couldn't find anybody with his name and date of birth. I wasn't sure if they automatically checked driver's license information as well as by the way that they answered it. With Gabby, when you collected her information, they came back over the radio and said negative on 29s and unable to locate a 27. With them not being able to find a 27, why didn't you verify the information? He said, I'll be honest with you. I don't know. I could only speculate as to why. I can tell you this, the driving statuses weren't on my highest priority list. Okay, checklist. Again, QRH, people. We need a law enforcement QRH worldwide. When you pull over a vehicle, step 1, ask to see a driver's license and then run that driver's license through the system and check if there's anything going on with that person's record. Am I right? 35. Also check whose van it is. Okay, or whose car. 35. I offered my advice and said if they are unable to locate 27 information, you either didn't get the right information, whether or not it's them lying to you or you misunderstanding it, not the right state, etc. If dispatch is unable to find 27 information and they say they have driver's licenses, then something's wrong, especially if you're looking for warrants or protective orders. If you don't have the right information, you're not going to be able to find the information if it's there. He said, I definitely learned a lot since that day. I'm not going to lie to you. It's weird. Obviously, the sentence before was, I'll be honest with you. And now it's like, I'm not going to lie to you. Yeah, we sure hope not. I definitely learned a lot since that day. Isn't that the worst? When it takes tragedy to learn a lot. It sucks. 36. I'm guessing you didn't catch when you were collecting her information and you read back some of the letters and you read it back wrong and she didn't hear you read it back wrong. Do you remember that you collected the last name Petito rather than Petito? He says, I don't remember that, but I can tell you this, that the earpiece I had at the time was garbage. Oh, now it's the earpiece's fault, oh my word. I couldn't understand everything, and it was really hard to talk to somebody and listen to that because it's required to pay attention to it. It's very possible that I got the wrong information and sent that across, and that could have been the problems behind the 27-29 discrepancies. Okay. I don't think Gabby was talking to you through the earpiece, though. She was right in front of you, right? Unless it was, relayed to him from one officer to the other. Okay. 37. You took several pictures during this incident, most of which were Brian, and then of both of their driver's licenses. A. Why did you not take any pictures of Gabby's injuries? He said, I don't know. Again, like I said, Officer Pratt was taking the majority of the conversation with Petito, and I just made an assumption that he did that. Now he doesn't even call her Gabby. He just calls her Petito. 38. Why did you not upload the photos with the report? That one, to this day, I still don't know. Yeah, we don't know either. And you know what we see? You know what we see? We see a freaking red flag. There it is. We see a red flag, okay? This red flag be flashing. Anyway, okay. You don't know why they weren't uploaded? He said, I could have sworn I did. I'm generally good about uploading pictures that I take, and for whatever reason I missed. Where are the photos now? They're not on my phone. I look for them and look for them and look for them. Oh, they vanished into thin air. 41. Are you aware of policy, whether or not it says about using your personal cell phone to take photographs? I checked my personal cell phone too. I don't have them on there. I don't delete pictures on my cell phone. 42. So you're issued a department cell phone? Yes. That's the one used to take the pictures with? Yes. While checking for injuries on Brian, there appeared to be a large scratch or scar underneath his left pectoral. Did you notice this mark, and if so, what was it? If I had seen it, I would have addressed it right then and there. 45. Gabby spent the majority of her time inside your patrol vehicle. Is there video and audio of Gabby in your back seat? We don't have in-vehicle video or sound, so the only video audio that would have occurred would have been on body cam. Man, imagine if there was. Maybe they need that in the cars from now on. Yes. 46. What about dash cam? Shook his head left to right, indicating no. 47. You don't have the dash cam, so you don't have the video of the driving pattern? Nope, we don't have dash cams. Damn. 48. You tell Gabby that you have to separate her and Brian. Please explain the legal authority you have to separate someone if you don't believe a DV assault had taken place. He says, oh, there's a long answer. Well, I originally was going to arrest her for DV assault, and I told them that I wanted to separate them so they could cool off. And I mean, me personally, if I get into a combative situation with anybody outside of work, my first instinct is to just walk away. Because if I'm fighting with somebody, it means that I care. So I'm not going to fight with my wife or my parents or family members or friends. So it's easier for me to walk away, cool off, and regather my thoughts. And then sit down and have a conversation instead of being at each other's throats, yelling and screaming, not getting the basic point of what the argument is about, what the argument is about through. Number 1, he's projecting big time. 2, he sees himself in Brian. Again, okay, no, we're going to put it up again. It's a red flag. And number 3, it's a very poor choice of words here to say, instead of being at each other's throats, yeah, Brian was at her throat and she ended up murdered just 2 weeks later. Strangulation and blunt force to the head and neck. My wife, here he goes again. My wife has severe anxiety. She takes medication for it, but the medication doesn't protect her from bad days. Duh. It just reduces the number of bad days. And there are times that I fight with her that I can't. I can't reason with her in any shape or form. So I have to take a step back, give myself a minute to cool off, give her a minute to cool off, and after some time we can go back and have that conversation. It kind of eliminates the lack of reasonableness that she can come to sometimes. Oh, so your wife is not reasonable in the times when she's very upset with you and very anxious or having a bad day? Oh, so same as you think that Gabby was manic and panicked and unreasonable and emotional. He saw himself in Brian. That's why he took him to a motel. Treated him like gold. So hectic. This is very, very hectic. They need a checklist. And because they were telling me it had been building up for days or weeks or whatever it was, and they'd been on the road for days, weeks, months, whatever it was, I can get how frustrating it can be to be living with somebody so close, and then you have arguments, and then you have nowhere to go. I've got a living room I can go and sit and watch TV. I've got a car I can go for a drive and go watch a movie. I've got these things that they didn't have access to, so I told them I wanted to separate and avoid contact with each other so they have somewhere to go. That's what I was trying to do. I was trying to create that option for them. Him in the hotel, her in the van, them not together. You don't have to go somewhere to get that cool off time. You just have to separate, and that's what I was trying to create for them. You're not a counselor. You're not a psychologist. You're not a DV expert by any means, clearly. And no, you just got to follow the law. No, this is like too much emotion. You know what I mean? It's too much projection, unfortunately. And yes, we're looking at this because what can we learn from this? And it's just like, I think they need a checklist if they don't have one already. And 2, I just think, no. You cannot say, I've been through this, so therefore they're going through this, because you don't know what their situation is because you knew them just for 1 hour of your entire life. 49. Is there any legal authority you have to separate someone if you don't believe a DV assault occurred? I don't recall. Okay, I think the answer is no. 50. That's not really something to recall. Exactly. Do you have the legal authority to separate somebody when you don't believe a DV assault occurred? He says, I can't answer that because I don't know. Okay, the answer is no. Write it down. I can't. I don't know off the top of my head right now. Okay, So off the top of your head, the answer is no. 51. So if there's a verbal argument between cohabitants, nothing physical, no crime, do you have the legal authority to make them separate? He said, like I said, I'd have to sit down and look that up because I don't know that off the top of my head. Wow. 52. You tell Brian that Gabby didn't intend to hurt him when she was hitting him, so technically speaking, it does not fit the letter of the code. Please explain how you reached this conclusion. I was speaking to Officer Pratt, and he was showing me the code, and in the code it says with the intent to cause harm, and going off that and the direction I was not instructed to take, but another avenue I was given as an option in that scenario, I went with that one because she said that she didn't have the intent to harm him. And with the very limited information I had at the time, there was no sense of deceit from her. She wasn't trying to lie to us or anything like that. There weren't any signs of there being any lies. Well, in DV cases, sometimes the victim covers up for the abuser. Sometimes, so that they can protect themselves and not suffer the consequences. 53. Did you look at the code, or are you just going off of what you were told? Eric showed me the code. 54. So is that the code for assault or the code for bodily injury? Do you remember? Because you guys did talk about both. I don't remember. 55. Have you had any assault charges since this time? Yes. Have you read the code since? Oh, I was answering your question if I knew which one we were looking at that time. I don't remember what I was looking at at that time, but assault does say with the intent to cause bodily injury. 57. At this time, I read Officer Robbins the code for assault. After reading him the code, I asked if anywhere in the code it said intent. Oh man. It might have been somewhere else, I'm not sure. He brought it up on his computer in his car. 58. So you haven't looked at it since this incident. You haven't read the assault code. I have. I just handled an assault call a couple of weeks ago. But I've been avoiding the news and stuff like that and putting it far from my mind because I don't want it to dictate how I make decisions for the future, but I still want to learn from the decisions of that day. Okay, to learn from it, you have to read the code. And if you say that you just handled a case a couple of weeks ago, it sounds like you still didn't read the code. Read the code. 59. At the time of this incident, you were clearly under the impression that assault, the definition, was an intent to cause bodily injury. Is that how you actually felt then? He says, yeah. 60. The decision you made that day. Did you make that decision to benefit yourself or to benefit anybody else? You made your decision based on what? What was the best for the situation? Sometimes it's handcuffs. Sometimes it's having an ear for them to listen. To give them to listen, and sometimes it's no action at all, depending on the situation, obviously. I thought that day I was doing the right thing for that situation. No. You're not a buddy at the bar, and you're not their friend and not their counselor. You don't have to be an ear for them to listen. 61. Are you aware of Utah State Code duties to arrest? Yes. 62. When a peace officer responds to a DV call and has probable cause to believe an act of DV has been committed, a peace officer shall arrest without a warrant or issue a citation to any person that the officer has probable cause to believe he has committed an act of DV. At the time of this incident, do you believe you followed Utah State Code? At the time, I did. 63. Are you aware of anywhere in your policy or Utah State Code to not make an arrest if it is in fact a mental health issue or if that is the cause of an issue? Are you aware of anywhere that tells you you don't have to make an arrest because of that? Well, damn, in that case, they didn't have to arrest Jeffrey Dahmer, did they, back in the day, or anyone else like that? At the time of that event, I was still on FTO. Officer Pratt was my FTO, so I was following instructions that were bestowed upon me. I hate to make it sound like I'm throwing him under the bus, because I'm not. I made the decision that day, not him. But I was going off the information that I had available at the time. Ah, so you were coerced into what you were going to do. No. 64. When you and Officer Pratt, after reading through the statute and talking about whatever Gabby's answer will seal her fate based on her intent, how would you describe the questioning of Gabby regarding her intent? Do you remember? Vaguely. 65. You didn't really say anything, but you were there. Do you remember the questions asked or in the manner in which they were asked? No, I don't. I just remember her being asked about the intent and her denying the intent to hurt him. 67. How does the report approval process work? It goes to the sergeant, which was Assistant Chief Palmer at the time. He reviews it, and then he sends it off to our admins, and then I'm not sure where it goes from there. 67. Did you FTO review it at all? Yes. 68. Was there any connections made prior to sending it up? I'm sure that there were. I mean, I still make... Oh, corrections, sorry. Not connections. Did I say connections? Corrections. He says, I'm sure that they were. I mean, I still make corrections on mine before I submit them. I also remember that it was sent back to me from Assistant Chief Palmer because of wordings and certain things. He wanted me to fix the wording on it. 69. How many call numbers are there? Full-time there are 11. Part-time there are 2. And animal control and victim advocate have call signs. Okay. Was there any follow-up done with Moonflower? Did they have any surveillance, video surveillance that would have caught any of the incident? I didn't do any of that follow-up, no. Man. 71. As far as the original 911 caller, did you reach out to him at all? No, I didn't. The day of the event, I didn't know that our 911 caller was different from, or I thought he was our 911 caller. It wasn't until later that I learned that the 911 caller was different. 72. How did you learn that? Another officer, I think it was Officer Pratt, told me that the 911 caller was not this person. 73. On FatPot, it shows you the reporting party, typically phone number and name. Sometimes, if we call out and clear 10-8, they also clear the call so that eliminates all that information off our screens. 74. While you're still on it, you can look at it and see who the caller was and their phone number, though, I imagine. Do you remember if you looked at it and seen that it said? I didn't look at the caller information. The whole time I looked at that screen, I was looking at the license plate number because I saw a vehicle. When the call came across the radio, I started heading that direction, and just as I got towards the North Bridge, I saw a van that kind of fit the description from a distance. And so I scrolled through it to find the license plate number and license plate state so that I could catch up to the vehicle and confirm or deny whether it was or was not the vehicle involved. That's the only time I remember looking at the call comments. I also remember getting on the radio and asking them to confirm it while I was trying to find it. 75. So you don't ever recall seeing at the very top of it the name and the phone number? I wasn't looking for it. 76. Is there anything else you can think of that would be important to note that I haven't asked about? One of the main things about this call was I only had 2.5 months experience at the time. I think it was just shy of 2.5 months. I was still on FTO and I still had a lot to learn. I have a lot to learn still today, and I know that I made mistakes that day, and I believe I haven't made those same mistakes since. I mean, I feel for the guy, 2.5 months experience, okay, but yet when he says I haven't made those same mistakes since, well, he did, because you said that a couple of weeks ago you responded to a DV call, and yet you haven't read the assault code. I have learned from this whole ordeal how something as simple and yet as complicated as a possible DV can blow up into a double-bodied national worldwide event. Okay, so if you did not believe that it would ever turn into something viral on the internet, how would you behave then? I have gotten better at my report writings. You shouldn't have had so many questions about my report. I know that, and that's exactly what I would have thought when I read my report from your perspective. Why are there so many questions unanswered in this? And there are discrepancies between body cam and my report, and I recognize that too. And these are the things that are not what occur as severe as this anymore. You mean you make effort in your report writing now? Oh no. 77. When you're on FTO, are you always driving your own vehicle? For the first couple of weeks, I was in a passenger seat. When I completed EVO, because my academy didn't put me through EVO, they said it was on the department's responsibility. I switched FTOs from Assistant Chief Palmer to Sergeant Reisenhoover. Yeah, make sure you call him Sergeant Reisenhoover, not Monty. And he threw me in the driver's seat, but he drove in the passenger seat. That went on for a while, and as time went on, Sergeant Reisenhoover then said, you drive your vehicle. I'll respond to your calls, and you respond to my calls. Basically team. Okay, so Moab police a little bit casual. They're calling Sergeants Monty by their first name. I mean, damn. And just like, it's okay. We'll respond to each other's calls. What? 78. What if you get called to 2 different calls? It never happened, so I really don't know. I truly believe it would depend on the severity of the call itself. If there was something as an officer information about a traffic collision inside a parking lot, and minor damage, no injuries. I mean, I was sent on those myself because I was just filling out people's information and making sure that an exchange occurred. When did you say your start date was? He says 5/31 of this year. 31st of May of 2021. Okay. Now, page 78. Officer Eric Pratt interview notes. Let's have a sip of water, shall we? How many years of law enforcement experience do you have, and how long have you been with Moab City Police Department? 16 years total with Moab. Email Braden. 2. Did you have access to your body-worn camera video and dispatch call information when preparing your report? I had access to the body-worn camera footage. Did not have access to the 911 audio. Has to request that, and sometimes it takes weeks. Said they had the dispatch notes at the time of the call, unless you copy and paste the notes into a Word document, which he didn't do. Said Moab uses FatPot and GCSO and uses Spillman. Due to the two different softwares being utilized, once the call is closed out, they are no longer able to see the notes associated with the call. Okay. 3. Did you review your body-worn camera video prior to or during the time you were preparing your report? He doesn't recall, states there's a log that would show whether or not he reviewed it. He stated it was pretty common for him to review his body camera footage. 4. How many calls are you aware of that were made to dispatch regarding this incident? I'm only aware of one. 5. How were you notified about this incident? Dispatch, online reporting, etc. Dispatch broadcast information on the radios, making it so everyone could hear. Questions from the written report. When speaking with at the Moonflower Co-op, did you have your body camera activated? No, I did not have it activated at the Moonflower. Not that I recall. If I did, then it would be uploaded, but I don't think it was. Could have been, but I don't think it was. 7. Did the witness report anything to you while you were with him at the Moonflower that's different than when you talked to him on the phone? No, he didn't tell me anything at the Moonflower. I went to the Moonflower to find the reporting party that actually called. When I got there was no one there. He stated that is why he didn't start his body camera. He was walking back to his car and the guy yelled out and asked him if he was there for the domestic. Officer said he was getting in his vehicle at this point and he asked the guy if he was the one that called the incident in. They said he wasn't, but saw what happened. He asked for his name and phone number so he could call him later to get a statement from him. He told this person what was most important right now was to describe the white van and ask if there was anything that stuck out. Officer Pratt stated that white vans are extremely common in Moab and wanted information he could put out over the radio to help narrow down the search. Okay, this person told Pratt that the van had a backpack attached to the back of the van. Officer Pratt relayed that information to dispatch to assist in the search. Pratt said at this time Officer Robbins stated he had located a vehicle matching the description with a Florida plate, so Pratt didn't have time to obtain their statement. Pratt told this person he would call him later for a statement and responded to the location where Officer Robbins had the vehicle stopped. Whoa, so white vans are extremely common in Moab? That's quite hectic because, man, if they have footage, there must be lots of video footage available in the area. Are they so common? I'd love to ask the people that live in Moab. I suppose it could be a really great place to travel through. It's just weird how he says, he doesn't say vans. He doesn't say RVs are really common or vans, or the van lifers come here often. It's like white vans are really common here. Okay. Right. Officer Pratt went on to explain that he thought this person was going to have a story consistent with that of the individual who called 911 and stated he assumed incorrectly that I was going to have the two statements from two different witnesses that are pretty similar, and that's what I was going off when I ended up on that stop. Pratt stated that typically when you have two independent witnesses to an incident, these stories are usually pretty similar. 8. In your report, you stated it wasn't clear, but I believe it was reported that the male had been observed to have assaulted the female. Can you explain what wasn't clear and why it wasn't clear? Officer Pratt asked, do you know if that statement is referring to whether or not the caller had not made that clear, or whether or not generally it wasn't clear because I had two conflicting witnesses? I told him I told him that was up to him to answer, and I showed his report to him and pointed out where the statement was made. The only thing I can say about the way it was written is it has to be after I wrote this report, after the incident was completed, and by the time the incident was completed, I knew I had one person saying the opposite of another person, and those are my two independent witnesses, so to me, that's why I would have written it wasn't clear. Officer Pratt went on to explain that when he writes a report, he writes it with the thought in mind, he is writing it for someone who wasn't there and didn't see anything. He tries to make it so anyone who is reading it can understand kind of what happened. Officer Pratt said by the time he was writing this report, it still was not clear because I have one caller that called in and said one thing, and I have another person that made a report over the phone and said the opposite. So it isn't clear at the time I wrote the report. I clarified with Officer Pratt that the statement wasn't specific to the 911 reporting party. Officer Pratt brought it up. It had been 2 months since the incident and stated that after he read the report, that is what he believes he meant by it. He said at the time the report was written, it still wasn't clear to me because I had 2 witnesses saying opposite things, so therefore I don't think it could be clear to the reader. Page 80. Number 9. While talking with Gabby, she reported to you that Brian grabbed her face, which caused a scratch to the left side of her face. In your report, you state, no one reported that the male struck the female. After being notified by dispatch of the reported incident, as well as Gabby telling you what happened, how did you come to the conclusion in your report that nobody reported Brian struck Gabby? Officer Pratt explained that the people he spoke to were Brian, Gabby, and an independent witness. Officer Pratt stated none of them reported that. Officer Pratt explained that since he couldn't go back and listen to the dispatch audio, has to be formally requested and takes time, he was out with them for an hour, dispatched to an urgent call of someone drunk and laying in traffic, and many more calls after this. By the time he was able to write his report in the middle of the night, he recalls having 3 consistent stories, none of which was that Brian hit Gabby, but rather they were all saying that Gabby was hitting Brian. Officer Pratt stated by the time he started to question himself on if he even heard the audio from dispatch correctly, he was wondering if he heard it wrong or if they dispatched it wrong based on the statements he received during the call. Officer Pratt added that he's been pre-programmed to hear a dude's hitting a woman, so with all those factors it made him second guess if he was recalling the dispatched information correctly. Brian said the one thing he knew for sure was out of the 3 people he talked to, none of them reported Brian hitting Gabby. Officer Pratt then explained that they all said Brian grabbed Gabby's face. Brian said that Brian, Gabby, and this person's statements were strangely consistent. I don't recall this person or Brian stating this. I told Officer Pratt that I didn't recall them all stating Brian had grabbed Gabby's face. Officer Pratt went through what he could recall with Brian's statement. Officer Pratt recalled Brian stating he was pushing Gabby back when she was hitting him with the cell phone. He then said, it seems to me, he said it, but to be honest with you, I haven't watched that body cam footage since September 11th when I was called by Northport Police and wanted information on it. He went and looked for the report to refresh his memory and he couldn't see his supplemental report. He didn't know why his report wasn't coming up when he did the search query. At that time, he thought maybe he hadn't done a supplemental report. Officer Pratt said he actually watched the body cam footage on September 11th, so he could do a supplemental report. Officer Pratt said he did a supplemental report after watching the body cam footage, and the next day he was asked by Sergeant Neumeyer and Adair why he had 2 supplemental reports on this case. Officer Pratt said he told them that he thought he had written one, but when he went to read it to refresh his memory and answer questions for Northport Police, he didn't see it there. He said he was told that there were 2 supplemental reports by him, one from the day it happened and one that he had typed up after watching the body cam footage. Officer Pratt said he told them that they could either keep them both, or if they are going to only keep one of them, they should keep the original, as that was written while things were fresher on his mind. They deleted the newer report he typed up and kept the original. Officer Pratt said that was the last time he watched the body cam footage. Officer Pratt said again he really thought Brian had mentioned grabbing Gabby's face, but he could be wrong. Yeah, Brian didn't. Not from what we saw. He said he does know Brian admitted to pushing Gabby. He said he remembers this specifically because it was important for him to find out when Brian pushed Gabby, further explaining that if someone is hitting you and you push them, it's self-defense. However, if you push someone and then they hit you, then it's not self-defense. I asked Officer Pratt about his statement again that nobody reported that the male hit the female, despite the statements of Brian grabbing her face and causing a scratch. I asked Officer Pratt if he took that literally and didn't consider someone grabbing a face a strike or a hit. Officer Pratt confirmed that he didn't consider someone grabbing a face as a hit or a strike. He gave examples of a hit being a hit, a slap being a slap, etc. Officer Pratt explained that he believed it was very important when we interview people, stating that maybe we could have done better at this, to figure out what kind of contact was made, and gave examples of open hand, closed hand, with a weapon, punch, slap, grab, etc. He explained the importance of it as it relates to injuries that are caused and observed. He further explained the importance of this information as it relates to what they're doing or not doing, arrest or no arrest. Officer Pratt said that although he doesn't consider a grab of the face a strike, he stated that it could be an assault. Officer Pratt said it depended on what was going on. Officer Pratt then went on to explain the definition of assault, stating it was an attempt with unlawful force or violence to do bodily injury to somebody. Regarding the scratch on Gabby's face, Officer Pratt said if that scratch was a result of a face grab that was intended to cause with unlawful intent to cause bodily injury, so yes, for me, I think the definition between a punch, slap, and a face grab are important, but they're also important based on what's going on when any of those things happen. That's my opinion. 10. Gabby explained to you that Brian hit her and described it through demonstration because you asked, but did he hit you? Did he punch you? And she said, yes, but then she described it as the squeeze. Officer Pratt said, as he recalls it, Gabby never actually said yes, but instead she said, well, I definitely hit him first. There are 2 different times in the video. The first time, that is how she replies. The second time she said, I guess, but I hit him first. Officer Pratt said that is what he recalls, and to him, it still means that he, Brian, did hit her. Officer Pratt said he's not trying to get too much into the details, but thinks it's important that if she did say yes, that he doesn't recall it, even after watching the video since then. He repeated again that he only recalls Gabby saying, well, I definitely hit him first, and said, tomato, it implies he hit her. Fine. Damn, you're going to tomato this thing? No. 11. Gabby described it through demonstration of Brian grabbing her face and squeezing. Why wasn't there any follow-up with Brian regarding the statement of Brian grabbing Gabby's face? Officer Pratt stated that he really thought there had been. Pratt said he didn't know why there wasn't. He went on to explain the follow-up that occurred with a witness and said he didn't know all the things Officer Robbins said to Brian. Wasn't there for the majority of the interaction between Officer Robbins and Brian. Officer Pratt said he did tell Officer Robbins that Gabby reported Brian grabbing her face and that he did go off and talk to Brian. I shouldn't make these assumptions, but I assumed that he addressed it and it was corroborated and should have talked to Brian more about that. One issue that I have with this situation is, people say, these cops, they tried. They were there for an hour on the side of the road. Some of these calls require more than that. And this was one of those calls where I wish I had more time. I wish I hadn't been called away. I wish I didn't feel like I had to rush at all. But I'm out alone in a town of 5,000 with an annual increase of 3.5 million tourists. And I have a rookie that I have to watch after too. And I get called to a drunk guy laying in the road, and there's a lot I wish would have happened differently, like one other guy on duty. I could have stayed and helped more with this call and gone over some stuff and not felt rushed. If I didn't talk to Brian about that, or it wasn't followed up with Brian, that should have happened, for sure. I guess I assumed it had. I didn't know it hadn't. You want to spend more time on this? I feel like it should be less time and more checklist based. More about the law and the statutes and not looking at underlying reasons. Just respond to what's going on. If you think you got to arrest someone, arrest someone. If you follow the protocol, follow the protocol. You know what I mean? Oh, man. In your report, you put, this incident was more accurately categorized as a mental or emotional health break than a domestic assault. Please explain how you reached this conclusion. Officer Pratt explained they both claimed to suffer from mental health issues. Officer Pratt said he never found out if they were clinically diagnosed or self-diagnosed, but said there was evidence of such that he believed after interacting with both of them. You mean Brian said he had anxiety? Gabby said she had anxiety and OCD. It would have been a good question, maybe on a checklist, but not that they should get into mental health stuff, but like, have you been diagnosed? Wow. Anyway, Officer Pratt went on to explain that he has numerous kids of his own and said that for many years he has interacted with all types of people on the spectrum. Okay, on the spectrum. He doesn't mean that spectrum. Okay, on the spectrum from drug addicts to professionals. And said he can tell when he's dealing with someone who suffers from some type of illness. Okay, but dude, I'm checklist. Oh my word. Officer Pratt said he isn't a doctor. You mean, I know what he means, but you know what I mean. You could say, I'm not a mental health professional or a psychologist, but said that Gabby was clearly suffering. Officer Pratt said Gabby was anxious, so he would say she had anxiety. Gabby didn't want to be separated from Brian, so there may have been some codependency issues. Officer Pratt said Gabby wasn't a calm person who's collected, of sound mind, who knows themselves and knows what they're doing. Whoa. Am I allowed to get furious right now? Wow. That is quite something. Gabby wasn't a calm person who's collected, of sound mind. Now you're assessing who knows themselves and knows what they're doing, and you can assess that from meeting this person one time, and instead of assessing DV or holy moly, let's run the driver's licenses. He was trying to take her van. He was trying to steal her car, her phone, her laptop, everything, and just leave her with a backpack on the back. If someone did that to me, maybe, why not assess any rage there? What about anxiety being maybe anger? Meaning, he was trying to leave me stranded outside of the Moonflower Co-op. Take my phone. He was trying to take my phone. He was trying to steal my van. And he did end up stealing her van, which is still in the FBI's possession right now. I don't think that any human being in the situation with a freaking person like that is going to be calm, of sound mind. I do think they know themselves, and I think they know what they're doing. Probably trying to get away from this dude. Even though she said she doesn't want to be separated, that could be the signs of course, DV, or being like, oh no, because whether it's one night of separation and hot showers and saying the I love yous, when they put words in people's mouths. Okay, but then the next day, it's like all hell to pay. Consequences. It would have been Brian escalating in resentment, in revenge, in anger. But that's just a huge leap to say, yes, he just could see she wasn't a calm person who's collected, of sound mind, who knows themselves and knows what they're doing. Okay, but then Brian in the situation, the abuser, the person who ended up murdering her, was calm, was of sound mind, knew himself and knew what he was doing? Exactly. The abuser usually does. Again, admitting to not being a doctor, Officer Pratt said he observed what he believed were mental health issues with Brian from the very beginning. Some of the things he was saying, the way he was talking and acting, I saw the dynamics of their relationship, and I saw some things that, I'll be 100% honest. I didn't. If there were all these red flags that he was going to murder Gabby, I didn't see those. Okay, but one more time, you said what? Officer Pratt said he observed what he believed were mental health issues with Brian from the very beginning. The way he was talking and acting. Whoa. Anyway, okay, he said, I saw the same red flags I see every time I get called to a relationship issue. They don't call us there because they're doing great and want the police to come over and see how great they're doing. They call us because something is devolved, and then there's all these red flags, and if you do this job long enough, hey, there's that red flag again. And what I saw with Gabby and Brian was another unhealthy relationship. Okay, let's just back it up. They didn't call. Witnesses called. Anyway, so they didn't call to show their relationship to anyone. And in fact, their relationship being under a magnifying glass made this person that you say you observed having mental health issues, Brian, who was calm and collected and knew himself and what he was doing, murder his fiancée 2 weeks later. Oh, man. He said, and what I saw with Gabby and Brian was another unhealthy relationship. Now, usually that doesn't end in murder. Isn't the stat like 20%? I must look again, of DV cases ending in murder? That's scary. So if someone out there says you should have seen he was going to kill her, great. Tell them, come make $25 an hour to do this for me. Okay, no one can look into a crystal ball and be like, he's definitely going to murder her, not based on the situation. But the situation should not be assessed from a psychological or relationship standpoint, but risks, right? Checklist, risk assessment, follow the law, and base it on witnesses calling, being so concerned that they're like, oh my word, something really is weird going on here. Even human trafficking is what they were saying. Officer Pratt said he saw mental health issues on both sides, and if it was not an assault, which I decided it wasn't, then what else could it? Then what could I call it? They say they're mentally unsound. It wasn't an assault. If it was an assault, she would have had to be arrested. You still going to arrest her? So even though she got the scratch on her face, she's distraught. So she got a scratch on her face, he's got a scratch on his, but she's going to be arrested. But there's elements to the offense of assault, and you have to meet those. Just like when you tell the judge, hey, I've met these elements, court's not adjourned because the cops said it. Now the judge has to make sure the elements are really met. Well, it starts with a cop. So one of the elements for the offense of assault is an attempt with unlawful force or violence to do bodily injury to another. Officer Pratt continued stating that is why they asked Gabby, what was your attempt? What were you intending to do? Officer Pratt said, some people may think he's stupid because, duh, there was injury, so what do you think? He had redness all over him. He had scratches all over him. There's injury, so of course there was an assault. Okay. What about the redness and scratches on her face? What about checking her body for bruises, scratches, anything else? What about the state she was in? But okay. Officer Pratt provided a scenario of him taking a photograph while backing up on the sidewalk and backing into someone else who falls off the curb and into the gutter. The person who falls skins their knee and has injuries. Officer Pratt asked, is that an assault? Is there an attempt with unlawful force or violence to do injury to you? Or was I careless or made a mistake, or maybe you weren't looking, like this is just an accident? Officer Pratt further explains that if he is negligent enough, then maybe there could be some liability if through that negligence it caused injury to another person. Okay, but this was not a mistake of backing into someone in your driveway and they fell into the gutter and grazed their knee. This was Brian trying to commit grand theft auto, is it not? He's trying to steal her car and all her possessions and leave her stranded. No, they're both adults. But I would have looked into, wait a minute, let's stop these people and figure out what's going on. So driver's license, please, right now. Whose van is this? And then search the car for weapons. Huh? You may have arrested someone else based on that. Based on the crime. The crime, this assault thing is going backwards and forwards, but she had to jump through the driver's window seat to climb over him just to go with him. If she didn't do that, he would have sped off without her. Okay, my mind went to imagine if that happened. I wonder if that would have been better for her in the end or not. I don't know. Because then she would have called the police, maybe? Maybe, I would hope so. And be like, he stole my car. Maybe call the parents. This guy stole my car. That's a scary thought, because it could have turned out better. I don't know what to think about that. Anyway, Officer Pratt provided a scenario. Okay, we already did this one. Officer Pratt said he wanted to find out from Gabby her intentions because he's bigger, he's stronger, he's older. He clearly has influence over her mentality that looked unsavory to me. And all I could see from Gabby is she wanted to gain and try to maintain some equality in this relationship that I think she knew she didn't have. No, it's her van. She had the money. She had the van. I don't know where his $20,000 came from all of a sudden. Might be the inheritance. We don't know. But like, he's bigger. He's stronger. He's not even that much bigger. This is so hectic to say, he clearly has influence over her mentality that looked unsavory to me. To me, that's ding, ding, ding. That's an abuser. That's a narcissistic abuser. Hello. That's what it means. And all I could see from Gabby is she wanted to gain and try to maintain some equality in this relationship. You mean because she wanted to start a blog? And she wanted to drive her own car, maybe not let him steal everything that she had? Whoa, man. That I think she knew she didn't have. So he's saying he knew. Okay, but that's explaining a victim. So he thinks that Gabby knew she didn't have equality in the relationship and that she wanted to get it for herself. Oh my word. And when someone smaller and more frail is trying to get an equal setting at the table with someone who has all the power and dynamics are kind of in their favor because he's mentally messing with her, hanging her backpack outside, saying you need to go take a walk, and saying weird things to us like, what if I touch your radio? Like he was a weird, not healthy dude. Ah, you don't say. And that was clear. And she clearly was needing to be with him. I think she was needing her van. I know she didn't want to be separated from him that day because she was probably scared of the consequences of that. Oh man, so toxic. And at the same time, it's clear to me she smacked the crap out of him. Damn, I'm not allowing those dudes with her. So what's going on here? Is she abusive to Brian? He killed her. Who's the abuser? If you mentally and emotionally abuse somebody, can I charge you? If you physically abuse somebody, can I charge you? Yes, clearly physical abuse, I can charge you. So he's saying that maybe Brian mentally abused her, but he can't charge him for that. But then she reacted to that abuse and physically abused him, so he can charge for that. Ooh, man. Oh, this is bad. What I didn't want to see happen to Gabby, and unfortunately maybe something far worse did happen. Maybe. Yeah, no, definitely. And maybe the same thing would have happened and maybe something, I don't know. What I didn't want to see that day was her take all of the criminal responsibility for this incident upon herself at 22 years old. Maybe she wants to go get a state certification somewhere, get a license for her job. Maybe she just doesn't want to have a criminal record. Maybe she wants to go hunting. Maybe I just didn't want a 22-year-old girl who I felt like was trying to just, all she wanted to do was have an equal. I think she wanted to gain equality in that relationship with Brian and have some way to have the power and dynamics more even. And as a guys our size, okay, Brian's not your size, we think, well, you can't slap people and do that. Yeah, well, we've never been a 110-pound female with what was her intent was up in the air for me. Let's put it that way. It sounds like you identifying her as, oh, she's a feminist. She's trying to have equal power and she's being mentally abused. So therefore she slapped him. She's trying to get her power back. I don't think that was going on there at all. She actually seemed like a really wonderful, humble person, just from what we know, what we've seen, the videos, the interviews, what her parents say, just everything. I don't think that was even her thought process. I think she was just trying not to be abandoned and have this guy, who you recognize as mentally unhealthy and weird, steal all her stuff and leave her in a very unsafe space at that time in the afternoon, like right before it gets dark. Am I right? Or before Moonflower closes. Like, where's she going to go? It's especially if he has everything. And he even described it that way. Like, where would I go if she takes everything of mine? Yeah, except you were the one taking everything of hers. What was her intent? If Brian says I hit her and I wasn't trying to hurt her, I'm sorry. We see the power and dynamics there. It's not believable. This is just horrendous. When someone that size, who's in that situation, who's slapping her boyfriend, says, I just wanted him to stop telling me to calm down, it actually sounded reasonable to me. Now, that can be crazy, and that's probably the biggest thing people are going to say is, that's BS. It just sounded kind of reasonable that she wanted him to stop behaving the way he was behaving towards her, and it wasn't like she really thought she was going to do him bodily injury to any significant extent, or really hard. He's a lot bigger and stronger. To me, I believed her. Okay, but maybe ask, why was he telling you? Why was he telling you to just relax, to just calm down? Why? That would be the question. Why? Because he was trying to steal all her stuff. She was getting highly agitated and like, what the heck, man? Just give me my freaking phone. Give me the keys. Give me my van. It's a highly escalated fight at first. A verbal argument probably, right? And so that is what she's saying. It's not like I was just trying to get him to stop telling me to calm down. Yes, to stop invalidating her boundaries and what she's saying. Like, give me my van. Oh my word. And in other words, I think she wanted to have some equality in that relationship, and I don't think she had the tools in her toolbox to figure out how to do that in any other way than just start slapping him. I think Gabby's smarter than that. She was smarter than that. Not okay. Could she go to jail? Sure. Could I make the case that she assaulted him? Absolutely. Could it go to court and a judge could do something crazy and say, I don't think she really assaulted him like I did? Because that's what I did. I said, I don't think she assaulted him because I don't think she had the intent behind it to do bodily injury to him. I think she wanted to modify his behavior and she doesn't have the tools in her toolbox to do it. So it seemed reasonable when she said that is what she wanted. So one of the elements of the offense is missing. So we don't have an assault, so what do we have? Well, the hand fed me, they both have mental issues. So that's why I said we had a mental health crisis. I followed the evidence, and if it wasn't assault, it must be a mental health issue. That's what I looked at it like. And maybe it was wrong, but I didn't want Gabby to suffer the whole weight of this. And another thing I'll say, it did cross my mind that when he bailed her out the next day, like he said he was going to, when he comes down to the PD and signs away the little paperwork that says they can't hang out anymore, it didn't occur to me at that time that he's gone, because he mentioned in the video, I remember he said, and I didn't hear him say this to Robbins, but I got the impression, and we found out later it's true, they didn't have a lot of money. So, if he's going to bail her out, is he not going to have more control over her now? Now we're out of money. Blame it on her because I had to bail you out. It's all going it's going to do is put the power and dynamics more on him in his favor, where he's like, now we have to come back to the court or video court. Now we don't have the money because I had to bail you out. Okay, no, he's not bailing her out at all. He didn't have the money. She worked a lot of jobs to even just make the money to buy the van. It was her van. He even used her money after murdering her. And again, stealing her van. And then stealing her money. Which was what the only warrant for his arrest was at the time. Oh, we're in another fight. Go ahead and call the cops. How did that go for you last time? It didn't. Witnesses called the cops. She didn't, and he didn't. They hauled you off because I'm too cute. Excuse me? Because I said crisscross applesauce. So they didn't arrest me. Well, yeah. It's pretty much what happened. Was he too cute? Was he crisscross applesauce so they didn't arrest me? It sounds so hectic to say what Brian could potentially threaten her with. Well, look at that. I'm too cute. They didn't hold me off. See, how's it going to work out for you? Well, it wouldn't go like that because, as I say, witnesses called. I wish Nina would have called, right? The lady that saw them at the Mary Piglet's restaurant and anyone else that saw them that day. And then the police get called again. That would have been so good. Oh, my word. So if you see something, say something rather. You just don't know what kind of trail is behind seeing that. As grown men, we laugh about how absurd that would be to think for him that he got away with it for being cute. He didn't get away with anything for being cute. We saw his stupid BS. He got away with what he got away with on August 12th here because I couldn't charge him with a straight face. No judge, if I wrote my PC statement correctly, would sign off on his incarceration on that day. I would have to omit things from my report or put the entire purpose for the arrest on the caller that drove by. I would have to disregard the physical evidence. I would have to disregard his statement. What about Gabby's physical evidence that none of you asked about? Gabby's statement and another independent person's statement to put him in jail for a scuff on her face that would not have been visible the next day, when everyone I talked to claimed that it was a face grab while she was wailing on him with a phone in her hand. It's not assault. Okay, but she said it burned when she touched it, so I don't know. I don't know if it would have just been gone the next day. If you reverse roles, and a man is actually hitting her, a woman, and she grabs his face and leaves a fingernail mark and she's as beat up as he was, and I took her to jail and tried to book her in, and the judge says, well, she's all beat up. Well, yeah, but she scuffed this dude's face, she grabbed his chin while he was hitting her. It's absurd. I'm sorry. If it's good for the dude, it's good for the girl. That's the way society wants us to play this domestic game. Oh, these words are very telling, because it's not a domestic game. And who cares what society wants you to play this domestic game? You see what I mean? It's like angry at equality and feminism. That's what I'm feeling, okay? They want us to treat men and women the same. Well, guess what? Reverse the roles and tell me I should take Gabby to jail if she had all the injuries on her Brian had. Oh, okay. And if all he had was a scuff from when she grabbed his face while he was hitting her. I'm sorry, I can't put him in jail, so I didn't. I'd have to lie or omit something to convince a judge to sign that PC statement. The only person that could have gone to jail was Gabby. I didn't think it was right, you know. I will die on this hill if it was wrong for me to not arrest her. I still wouldn't have arrested her. Sorry. Brian was as much responsible or more for what happened that day. She is at a disadvantage in every way. Emotionally, mentally, physically, and yes, she slapped him. He probably deserved every slap he got. I don't know what to say to that. I'm just like, oh dear. Well, he said it just like he believes it, just like that. He probably deserved every slap he got. Okay. And did she deserve the scratches on her face? It just, you know, if they weren't going to arrest anyone, then yes, get them in contact with some mental health professionals if that's the protocol and if you have those contacts. If she should have gone to jail and that's what should have happened, kick me out of the police department. Cool. I'll go back to being a drywaller where the worst thing I can do is mess up a joint or something on a wall. You know, I don't care. I wouldn't have done it any different. I gave Daniel the opportunity to make those decisions. I kind of steered him the way I thought was right. Oh, that's what Daniel was saying, Officer Robbins. Like coercing him into what he should choose, right? I kind of steered him the way I thought was right. And if he would have arrested her, I would have been fine with it. But I like that he didn't arrest her. Even knowing now that she was murdered later, if it had been the next day or a few days later, or still in Moab, okay, I would feel really weird. Like maybe it really could have changed something. But I don't know, 18 days later, 500 miles away, after he disengaged with her for 6 days to go back to Florida, I just don't think that charging her would have done anything but make the last few weeks of her life more miserable with this guy, as he punished her more before he killed her anyway. Okay, by saying as he punished her more means that you know he punished her before, which means make sure that she calls her mom or her parents. Make sure, like actually who are you calling? Maybe call the parents as well. I know they're adults, but if you feel like this is a mental health crisis, this is someone, I don't know, completely weird, mentally ill, whichever one we're looking at now. I'm just saying, okay, but then maybe what we can learn from this is there should be some sort of checklist to call a next of kin. Could have helped. That's the thing with adults. Even when adults go missing, it's like not treated the same, of course, as if children go missing. But this then could go into the endangered adults because of a mental health crisis chapter that sounds like it needs to be written if it isn't yet. This is so hectic. Okay, so he said, that's what I think. I don't know. Maybe by us taking her she would have had, oh, I'm breaking up with him. Maybe that would have been the end of it. I can't guess today any better than I could have guessed that day. I still don't think that she should have got those charges, and I didn't want her to. Well, leave your comments below what you think should have happened. Oh my word. Your report states no charges were filed and no one wished for charges to be filed or for the separation to take place, although that was at minimum what Officer Robbins required in lieu of making a case against Gabby for domestic assault. A. Do you believe a DV assault took place during this incident? I believe that my position as a PO on the front line of anything that ends up in court, there's a basic whether or not we have discretion on something like this. We are expected to use our common sense and figure out just basically whether or not there's a charge to be supported, and in that way we can kind of screen that stuff. To answer your question, one cop will go to that call and say this is absolutely an assault, and another cop will go to that call, and because he has a different point of view, he might say it's not, and then our duty is to document and support with reasoning, logic, and hopefully the law backing us, because we all read the same code, why we chose to do the arrest or not to do the arrest. And the better you are at that, usually the better cop you are. But everyone makes mistakes or reads something wrong, or you might send 100 cops to that call and they all say she should be arrested, for example, and then you send 180 of them think she shouldn't have. I do not know the answer to that. I do checklists. Yeah, it really helps. It really helped in aviation, like for real. Aviation safety, especially after 9/11, like really went up because you kind of remove human error, if you know what I mean. This is what I mean. There's a lot of human error and there's a lot of room for human error when it's based on interpretation. But when you have checklists, it really reduces how much human error can be in place. I know that I had determined that one of the elements for assault was missing. That was for her to use unlawful force or violence, attempt to use unlawful force or violence to cause bodily injury to Brian. When we talk about to attempt something, implicit with attempt is intent. You can't attempt something with no intent to do it. So obviously, intent is part of assault, which is what we talked about earlier. For me, one of the elements was missing, and so I looked at it, and I don't think we have an assault here. Now, another cop could look at that and say, I don't believe Gabby. I think she wanted to cause him bodily injury, and that's why she hit him. Now, this is an opinion because nobody can get in Gabby's head and find out what her intent was. That's why we spend so much time in court, way more time than I have on the side of the road. They have entire days of trials spent nothing more than just establishing intent on a crime. I don't have a special expert witness on the side of the road. I don't have 5 days on my trial with these people to figure out who to charge. I got like less than an hour apparently, so they trust me after 16 years to figure it out, and I took my 16 years of experience and I said I believe Gabby based on the totality of the circumstances and based on what she appears physically capable of and based on what I saw him doing and act the way he was acting, that I don't think she assaulted him. I think she didn't assault him because part of the assault is an attempt with unlawful force or violence to cause bodily injury to him. The result was some bodily injury to him. That was the result. What was the intent? She said to me, I wanted him to stop telling me to calm down. And I just believe her. I believe her based on everything I saw. So no, I don't think we had an assault. B. In cases of DV, if the victim doesn't want charges to be filed, in what circumstances can you honor those wishes? If we have something that has been called and supported by code as D or DA, we do not have the discretion to not file the charge. There is a shall attached. Doesn't necessarily have to be custody, but has to be that or a citation. C. How can Officer Robbins lawfully require a separation to take place in lieu of making a case against Gabby for domestic assault? He can't. If you're not going to charge them, you can't. He required it. He didn't say by law. They didn't ask. As far as I know, you can't require someone to separate. He feels like if they gave any indication they weren't going to follow that advice, then Officer Robbins would have made the other case for the safety of both of them. And obviously, we found out, ultimately for his safety, but we do have to consider his safety. He was the one that was marked up. So at that time, without the hindsight of him murdering her, as we assume is what happened, yes, we know that now, we were worried for both of their safety. But earlier you said it's a 110-pound girl who can't do any harm. He's bigger and stronger and he's in control as well, and playing mind games. But just because Brian was unsavory, I didn't necessarily like his vibe, doesn't mean we don't look out for his safety. She could have caused an accident. She was apparently hitting or pulling on his arm while he was driving such that he hit the curb. If we believe what she said and he said, which may or may not be true, but I don't have 5 days of court to figure that one out. yeah, maybe he was driving 3 times the speed limit to have a cop car chase. Maybe he was trying to get away from the cops. Did anyone consider that? Based on the evidence on his arm, on his right arm, which was on her side, with the scratches and the redness, it looks like someone was going to town on that arm. And he did hit a curb. So what we call this is physical evidence lining up with our observations. That's the best we can go off, so even for his safety. Okay, but who's unsafe? He doesn't want to stop for the cops at all. Saw the lights, adrenaline kicked in, and he drove 3 times the speed limit. At the conclusion of your report, you put EOS EMP. What does this mean? End of supplemental, Eric M. Pratt. Questions from body worn camera. Prior to responding to the scene, you ask dispatch for the phone number of the reporting party. Dispatch gives you his number. While on scene, you tell Park Ranger Melissa Holes that you would love to talk with the independent witnesses before calling. Why didn't you call the reporting party? I would have called. I got called to another call, and that was the next thing I would have been doing. The point where I got called away, where I would have, if Robbins had not called him, or if I didn't think he was going to, for example, if I believed that wasn't going to happen and I wasn't getting called away, then I would have called him. But by that time, that it was time to call, we had spoken with Gabby, spoken with Brian, spoken with an independent witness, and we see the physical evidence and everything was lining up. And the problem we have is by saying, okay, well, if only we had just called that first guy, okay, well, what do we have then? We still have a guy who said he was driving by, so I assume he's also paying attention to the car in front of him, traffic and the red light and this and that. Okay, are we minimizing his statement because he's also probably driving by or what? So comparing that with the guy who said he saw the whole thing on foot there, and then we have Gabby's and Brian's statement, and then we actually have physical evidence. I don't think if he would have said anything, if he had repeated everything he said to dispatch to me, it does not line up with physical evidence. It doesn't line up with another independent witness who has no reason to lie. It doesn't line up with what Brian or Gabby said. And don't forget, I told both of them what I thought was true at the time, but what I tried to use as leverage was I have 2 witnesses that are going to say, you hit her. So give me something, because usually if they can give me a little something, then I can start pulling on the sweater and unraveling. I was trying to get Brian to give me something. He didn't give me anything. Okay, but how about following up, which Officer Robbins said he didn't, with Moonflower workers, anyone that was at the Moonflower, other witnesses, surveillance footage they may have had. I go to Gabby. I think she's going to cover for Brian. I said, hey, we have 2 independent witnesses. I said this because I thought my witness would line up with what I thought this guy told us. I thought we were going to have the 2. And her response was, well, I definitely hit him first. At the end of everything, her statement was like Brian's was, like my witness. So if I had talked to the first witness, who, by the way, that's why I went to the Moonflower to talk to. That's the first place I went. I didn't know I was going to find anyone. I went there to talk to the guy. That's the first thought I had, was to talk to him. I didn't know my greenie was going to find the van so quick. That's Officer Robbins. My point is, yeah, he should have been talked to. And I don't know if it was on the video or on a text or, can't understand, or later, but while I had been called to another call, or before I left the scene, or sometime while it was still relevant, while they were still in town, I told, and I'm not putting the blame on my trainee, it's not his fault, I said, get the reporting party's statement. I had already called this person, I already spoke to a witness, and I told them, we're going to get a written statement from him, and I made the arrangements. I told Robbins, we're going to do that. Well, I didn't understand, but I do remember watching my video after finding out that he hadn't got because I read his report. I had to approve it. So I read his report like, hey, this is great, great, great. Where's the reporting party statement I told you to get? He said, I got it. I said, well, where is it? He said, it's right there. And he was referring to this person's statement. So I don't know what he told you, but that night he told me that he thought this person was the reporting party. Now, I did watch the body cam footage at one point where I already knew he hadn't gotten that, and I wondered if I miscommunicated with my rookie. And so, I was careful to listen for the part where I did say to my rookie, I made it clear at least once, and probably more than once, that we had 2 witnesses. And I even remember that I told him while I watched the video when I did, that I told him that this other person was someone I found at the Moonflower. It was very evident that if my rookie had paid attention, he should have known there was 2. That these are not one. And he was also was the one at the end of everything. I'm on to the next call. He has his call up, and it shows what and not what, this person and not this person, and a different phone number. And also, I'm sure he was monitoring traffic. I did ask if we had the number for the reporting party because I wanted that information on the van. Like, so what happened? I went to the Moonflower looking for him, couldn't find him, walked around, and everyone acted like nothing had happened over there. That's weird, man. I thought they had gotten into a fight at a different grocery store because no one was there. There were so many people, no one rushed up to me. I thought I was at the wrong place. It was like if a dramatic event went down, nobody here seems to even register it. Like I was surprised. I was walking back to my car. I had asked for that phone number because I couldn't find the RP. I was getting back up to my door, getting into my car after that radio traffic was, when the person came and said, "Hey, are you here because of that domestic?" And that's the first time I was like, good, at least I'm at the right spot. Because I walked up and down the front of that grocery store and nobody was even concerned. No one offered to talk to me. No one seemed to care that I was there. It was weird. For whatever it is said happened, no one, when I got there, no one seemed to even expect police would respond. It was very weird. I thought we had the wrong location. Okay, so were you just standing there waiting for people to walk up to you, or were you walking in there questioning Moonflower staff and people who were there? So that's why I asked for that number. I don't know if my greenie rookie, if Robbins would have heard it, because at that point, maybe he was, I don't know for sure. I couldn't tell you, the video should. He probably had eyes on the van. He thought it was. He was probably following the van. So he was probably trying to give information and probably not hearing that, I don't know, you'd probably have to ask him. And maybe you already did, how it came to be that he thought, this is what he told me. And I don't know what he told you. He's very concerned about what Robbins told this person, right? He told the night that I asked about his report about not having the original caller's statement in it. He told me he thought that the guy whose name and number I gave him was the caller. Could it have been avoided? Sure. Could I have done stuff to make sure that happened earlier? I was pretty tied up with other calls most of the night, but I'm sure I could have taken a minute. I'm sure I could have. I thought it was handled. He's new. The buck stops at the FTO, and I know that. It was not done. It should have been done. Even as I sit here and tell you, it would not have changed the outcome if I still have 3 other witnesses, physical evidence. Okay, but you can't say 3 other witnesses when 2 of them are involved in the dispute. There's 1 other witness. Okay, physical evidence and observations all going one way, and a guy who said he was driving by and saw something different. What I assume even to this day is he drove by at the time, he saw Brian grab Gabby's face, and it probably looked like, if he's behind Gabby, it might have looked like a slap, it might have looked like a punch. He probably saw something that looked like her head move as Brian grabbed her face. I can't know, I don't know, I never talked with the guy. I wish I should have. There's no way I can tell you this investigation should have had an end of report at the end of it without having talked to the guy who called. There's not an excuse for it. I can explain it. I can't excuse it. I can't imagine what he would have said, especially if it was what he told dispatch that could have changed the decision that was made. Now, maybe if we didn't have that other independent witness, sure, it wasn't going to be enough. So even though he said he was slapping the girl, it wouldn't have changed anything? 15. Once you found out he hadn't been contacted, you guys still have never reached out to him. There's still no statement from him. No, I could be wrong, and I know you could find this out. The night I approved Robbins' report was either that night, or if we were too slammed because there was not an arrest made, he might have done it the next night. If it was the next night, I believe that he probably hadn't been contacted. The decision to not contact him was probably because the assumption that Gabby and Brian were gone and out of town, and would be very difficult to re-find to change anything. Also, because I don't think that we felt like anything he said, especially if he just repeated to us that he saw what he saw, would have changed our decision anyway. Okay, but ultimately at some point I did reach out to a supervisor and asked if we should call him to get a statement from him, and it was like, the event's over, they were all gone. And the question was posed to me, Eric, would it have changed the decision you made? And I said, no, absolutely not. It wouldn't have changed what we did because we had our observations, physical evidence, and we have 2 statements plus another independent statement, and the guy told dispatch he was just driving by. That's not going to be enough probable cause to change the outcome of that decision. 16. Who was it, supervisor, that you asked about that, calling this person? I think it was Chief Edge, but it was much later because it was before the media frenzy, like when Northport called. Eric said he told Chief that Northport was calling and it may be something they need to find out. I think the Chief told me to hold off. Hold off on it. Would it have changed anything? Eric said based on the facts, he didn't see how the statement made to dispatch by could have changed anything. Why should a statement by a guy driving by who called dispatch get more weight than a guy who said face to a cop who saw everything and was not driving by? Why is one of those statements heavier than the other? Because it's a witness statement and they were concerned and they called. Well, maybe it's not, but then you have the physical evidence. And even if they cancel each other out, okay, even if they cancel each other out, you still have the physical evidence and you still have these two other statements and our observations. So no, unfortunately, this is one of those really tough things about being a cop. We don't always get it right, and even when we get it right, sometimes it looks like we got it wrong, and sometimes we got it right, but we should have done something a little different. Sometimes you don't know that, and sometimes you never find out if you should have. We get paid really not a lot of money to really make some crappy situations turn out like to be, the public, perfect. I'm not making excuses, but come on. My word, it sounds like it's time for a coffee break. Just a quick one. If you like my content and would like to say thank you, the easiest way to do that is, of course, to buy a copy of any one of my books or to buy me a coffee on buymeacoffee.com/Gisela K, which I'll link below for you. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for your coffees if you are buying it. If you want to say thanks to me for going through this entire document, line by line, sentence by sentence, word by word, then yeah, I would think coffee's the way. Or PayPal, because that's also a direct way to support me. Thank you so much. Let's continue now from this 17, okay? 17. So the witness told you that he thought Brian and Gabby were fighting over a phone. Now I understand from watching video, your time spent was primarily with Gabby. Do you recall if that aspect of fighting over the phone was talked about with Brian or Gabby? He says, I made an assumption that it looked to the witness like they were fighting over a phone. I made this assumption that when Brian told us that she was hitting him with a phone in her hand, that from the perspective of the witness, that it must have looked like they were fighting over a phone because she was hitting him with the phone in her hand. Okay, but Brian also said that she was hitting him with keys and rings, and yet she didn't have the keys. He did. I should have probably clarified with everyone, what was the fight over? Yes, you love intent. So yeah, what was the fight over? But from what I heard and understood, the fight was not over a phone. No, it was over the van and him trying to steal it. Anyway, from Gabby's own mouth and Brian's own mouth, they were telling me the fight was, and they were telling Officer Robbins, the fight was over basically Brian not respecting their mutual space in that van and maybe some hurtful things he was saying about her attempts to make a career for herself the way she wanted to, and maybe doubting it. Okay, but it also sounded like everything she was working on was in the van, and she wanted to get in the van, and he wanted to lock her out of the van and drive away. And he was the one that said he had dirty feet and can't help being dirty. And yeah, she was saying she wanted to just organize the back of the van. Yes. Okay, anyway, so when the witness said they looked like they were maybe fighting over a phone, I already heard from both of them what they were fighting over. And if he thinks they were fighting over a phone, maybe it's because she had a phone in her hand while she was hitting him. She had a phone in her hand. So I guess we could have gone over those details more and tried to figure out the phone thing, but it felt like Brian and Gabby were saying the same thing. They were separated immediately. Eric said they didn't have time to formulate a story. Well, that's true. They were saying the same thing. Brian got out of the van and said, hey, my feet were dirty and this and that. She said, I just cleaned up the van and he's in there making a mess. It doesn't sound like a phone is involved. Why should a guy watching someone hit someone else with a phone say it might have been over a phone? I don't know. I guess we could have said, hey, was the fight over the phone? I don't know if it would have changed. The motivation for the fight is kind of irrelevant. Like, did someone assault someone? Okay, if the motivation for the fight is irrelevant, then why is the intent? That sounds like the same thing. What's the intent of the fight? What's the cause of the fight? I don't know. They just focus so much on psychology, which they're not qualified to do, and mental health, and okay, but then that should also be irrelevant to you. They need a checklist. I'm telling you, I keep repeating myself, but they need a checklist. Does someone need to go to jail? I know there's scenarios we can dream up where the reason for the fight initiating can be really important, so maybe that's something to go over. But again, how much time do you spend when you're the only person on duty? For all intents and purposes, there's only one of us on duty. I'm required to go to every call the guy's on. So how much time do you spend on a call? You know, I work 10 hours. I gave 1/10 of my day to one couple, and I have many other calls. The other calls that are going on, a guy laying in traffic, that it's important to him that I come drag him out of traffic. All these calls are important. If I had my way, I'd spend as much time as I needed on every call to make sure every call worked out right. But they want us to begin snapping fingers repeatedly. They want us to. And we don't have the staff. I'm not blaming the department, but we don't have staff. I think you're blaming the department, which is fine. I do think I think he's saying they don't get paid enough for this. They don't have the staff. I understand that. Okay, 18. You explained to Officer Robbins how valuable it is to read the state code word for word. You have the statute for assault pulled up on your laptop and read it to Officer Robbins. An attempt with unlawful force or violence to do bodily injury to another. A. What website did you use to access this information? The Utah Legislature website? B. Did you believe at the time that you read the entire definition of assault to Officer Robbins? Okay, I believed I had, and I also believed that when I got to the bodily injury, I went and looked up the state's definition of bodily injury to further expand on what the code is talking about. I hope I didn't miss a single word. Your question makes me wonder, but yeah, I thought I read in the whole statute. 19. You explained to Officer Robbins how important words are in the code, especially in the court system. You talked about there having to be the intent to do bodily injury, and further explained that attempt is implicit with intent. You looked up the definition of bodily injury and conclude that if Gabby didn't intend to cause Brian pain, illness, or impairment of physical condition, then she didn't commit an assault as defined in the code. A. What is your understanding of the various culpabilities as it relates to various crimes under Utah state law? Intentionally, knowingly, recklessly, criminal, negligence. Some offenses, if you're going to be found guilty, require intent, and some of them don't. I'm not a lawyer, obviously, or I wouldn't be doing this job. But generally, as officers, we go into the code book and we try and figure out what the legislator wrote that, from the wording in there, is one of the elements of this offense intent. From my understanding, there's certain crimes you don't even have to prove intent. There are some statutes that explicitly say there doesn't have to be intent. He gave the example of a 27-year-old guy who went on a date with a girl who showed him his ID as proof she was 18. They wound up having sex, and the state doesn't care. You could even have done your due diligence to check her ID. It could have looked real. Intent doesn't matter in that crime. You're going to jail, and you're being charged with that. Okay? When you look up the code for assault, at least what I read, and if there's more that I didn't read, what I read to Robbins was an attempt with unlawful force or violence. He then goes on to explain the allegory of shooting a basketball through a hoop. It seemed to me when you use the word attempt that intent is implicit in that, so I made the determination on the side of the road on this incident that part of an assault is intent, and that's why I gave the example earlier, bumping into someone and causing them injury. What I read led me to believe, based on my experience, that part of assaulting someone requires an intent to cause them bodily injury. If you're attempting to do this, then I see it as, and of course, there could be case law. I'm not a lawyer. There's all kinds of reasons I could be wrong. But they don't require me to go to law school to be a cop. You're required to have a high school diploma or a GED and fog up a mirror. So, what I read tells me, before they train you and everything else, that code to me said, the way I read it, she had to have some intention to be guilty of the assault. And of course, DV is not an offense. DV is an enhancement on the crime of assault. So, first thing, assault, then we can figure out if they're domestic partners and see if it needs to be enhanced. Okay. I walked away from that, and I feel to this day Gabby didn't. I take her at her word. She did not. It was not her intention. It was not her intent. It may have been the result, but it wasn't her. It wasn't the motivating fact behind her movements. And so that's why I say, hey, I don't think we have an assault here. Pushing an envelope, sure. Riding an edge, for real, yeah. 20. At the time and still today, you consider attempt and intent to be synonymous. I don't know. They are different words. I'll give you that. But I don't to this day. I still believe that if you attempt to do something, there must be implicit in that intent. Now, if someone tells me I'm wrong in that, or they show me the case law, or they got the lawyer that says they're not, that will be news to me today that it would have been then. Of course, if that were to come to my attention, I would adjust my future interactions because I have to follow up. I understand that. B. What is the culpability required for the crime of assault? My understanding is to commit the crime of assault, you have to have intention and you have to have bodily injury, and it has to be unlawful. You have to, unlawful force or violence, those are the elements. So I need all of them. I need the attempt. I need it to be unlawful, force or violence used, and then I need the result to be bodily injury. And I think I need all three of those. I thought that then, and I think that now. One of the reasons I don't get bored on this job is I learn stuff new every day. So instead of say I learn new stuff every day, I learn stuff new every day. Usually it's in court when a defense attorney schools me. Sometimes it's situations like this. At this time, I explained to Officer Pratt the 4 culpabilities and their levels. I also read Officer Pratt the assault code in full. And then he says, that does change things. I'm not going to say I haven't read the assault code many times throughout my career, and I'm sure I read that before. You know that second part, the or part, it has to be addressed. I would have to actually take time to read it and digest it like I did on the side of the road with the first part that I read, and probably I got sidetracked with bodily injury and went off to read that definition and neglected to scroll down. And if I did, that's a mistake, and it may have changed our decisions, but I can't say that even here and now, until I read it, and I really think about it for a few minutes, because I do take the act of putting people in handcuffs and taking their freedom and giving them charges very seriously, and I usually spend a little bit of time reading up on it first and then trying to figure out if that's going to fly. So yes, that second part you said, I would admit that could have changed what we decided to do, but I would still have to look it over and think about it. 21. You told Assistant Chief Palmer that you were going to go reread the statute and see if it fits or if there's a way it doesn't fit. After this, you determine that an assault didn't occur depending on Gabby's intent. You tell Officer Robbins that how Gabby answers the questions will seal her fate. A. Some say you deliberately coached Gabby in your questioning regarding intent that you would allow the investigating officer to make an arrest, either by citation or custody. Do you recall the manner in which you questioned Gabby? If I recall, I told her to not answer quickly and to think about it, and it was important and it would determine what would happen next. I think that's a fair thing to tell somebody. I think that's a very fair thing to tell them. And some would say that's coaching, but that's assuming that a 22-year-old girl knew what answer I wanted her to give me. I don't recall trying to get her to tell me one way or another. I do recall telling her to think about it because it's important. And I think that's a fair thing to tell somebody. B. Did you deliberately coach Gabby in her responses to your questions regarding intent? No. I had no idea what she was going to say. I hoped. So I ran K9 for a while. And when I was running K9, one of the things they taught us was you could cue your dog. And you don't know you're doing it because dogs will pick up on stuff that you do right before they find something every time. Because they read your body language really, really well, because that's what animals do. I'll be honest with you, as you put it that way, this is the first time it's entered my mind that maybe something I said coached her. And I could see why people might think that. I truly did not know what she was going to say next. I was afraid that she was going to say something that was going to make her go to jail. I didn't want her to go to jail, but I would have taken her to jail if she had said the other thing. And I don't consider giving someone fair warning to think about the answer because it's an important question to be coaching. Some people could see it that way, I guess. I don't think at the time I was coaching her at all, but I still think it's important that she understands. Not just, and he snaps his fingers, to shoot out an answer. I think she should think about it. Okay, but if animals can be trained to read body language, yeah, humans do it already. It's like majority of communication is body language. If I'm asking her questions, I want an honest answer. She needs to think about her motives. Most people don't know themselves that well. Oh, now most people don't know themselves that well. But previously it was Gabby had no idea who she was. But Brian did, right? Especially that young. I wanted to think, what was your motivation? Like, why? That's why I repeated it 3 times. I wanted her to tell me, like, for real, what was it? And I think she gave me a really honest answer. I think she gave me an honest answer. And I don't know how honest her answer would have been if I hadn't had her prepare herself for that question. Maybe I coached her into giving me an honest answer because that's what I was wanting. That's what I wanted. And honestly, it's haunted me. Her saying, I just wanted him to stop telling me to calm down. She's little. I have daughters. I can imagine them in these situations. I think I can totally see one of my daughters just wanting someone to stop telling them to calm down. I believe what she said. I believed it then. I still do. So hopefully the coaching I gave her was coaching to do some real self-reflection and give me the truth and not how could she know what answer I wanted from her. I don't know. Maybe it was that easy for her. Maybe I gave it to her that easy. I don't know. That's not what I was trying to do. I can tell you that. I think she gave me an honest answer. If she had given an honest answer, if she had given me an answer that I didn't think was honest, I would have said no. I just really believed her. I really believed her. At this point, I pointed out that he did just that when she blamed the backpack for causing her injuries. He pointed out there were witnesses that saw Brian hit her. Okay. Response. The biggest problem with that backpack thing that didn't get addressed in that video is the mark on her arm. Her arm was bruised. It's not from that day. Now we're going to DV. It was clearly prior. It wasn't involved in this incident. And the thing about her face is, I don't know if you can see it on body cam, the scratch to her face, the fingernail scratch was not significant. It was not deep. It was completely consistent with someone grabbing someone's face. And if they hadn't cut their nails, then you can have a scuff. I truly don't think that in a day that you would still see it. But it was burning to a touch, and I think Brian's nails were pretty short, right? We saw his hands. I don't think so. Maybe 2 days, whatever. But the bruise, had it been like a fresh thing, we might have to push that a little more. But whatever lie that he or she or anyone says about to protect Brian or whatever, the bruise was not from that day. It was days ago. Oh my word. In speaking with Officer Robbins regarding what to do, you tell Officer Robbins that you support him in whatever decision he makes, even if they go as far as taking her to jail. If you didn't believe the incident rose to the level of assault based on how you interpreted Utah State Code, why would you be okay with and support Officer Robbins if he decided to take her to jail? Because it wasn't my job to make that decision. He was FTO, stage 3, last few weeks of his training. My job was to go there and make sure I observe what he's going to do, be there as a resource for him, and he's supposed to be free to make his decision at that point. As long as it's not something like absurd, like taking Brian to jail would have been absurd. I'm sorry, unless there are laws for being a shitty boyfriend and gaslighting and taking advantage of people mentally and emotionally for your own reasons, which there's no law against it. Okay then. So Brian could be a person who may be causing, allegedly, right? Based on, I can't say he was, but man, I guess in hindsight we could. So she's bruised up from days before. And the police officers know that he's a crappy boyfriend, he's gaslighting her, taking advantage of her mentally and emotionally for his own reasons. But still, there's no way they would have taken Brian to jail. Yeah, there's a big problem there. Because she had marks and he had marks. She had bruises and a scratch on her face. He also had minor stuff on his face. Was it also going to be there the next day? I don't think so, based on what they're saying. So yes, I would have intervened at that point where maybe, I'll give him credit. Maybe he could have convinced me that whatever happened back there rose to some kind of disorderly conduct. And maybe Brian needed a ticket for that. But that's an infraction, so it's still not going to land him in jail. Okay, how about a speeding ticket? How about trying to evade the cops? How about trying to steal Gabby's van? Disorderly conduct sounds just about right. Even if you said, hey, I think it's important for Brian to get a citation too. He could have talked me into it, sure. I don't think he has enough time and experience to go these places yet. That's fine, but it wasn't like I was hell-bent on not charging Brian. I would have loved to. I saw him as a problem. I really did, but just because I don't call him out and amp him up, that's not my job. I'm supposed to de-escalate. I'm not going to say, hey man, you think it's cute saying crisscross applesauce? It's not my job to rile him up, get him all wound up and turn him loose to the world. That's not my job. I'm not 22, I'm 39. I've dealt with people like this my whole career. I used to work at the prison for 3 years. I know these kind of guys. That sounds scary. It sounds like if you know those kind of guys and you worked at a prison for 3 years, then usually they're behind bars. But yet here you're saying you would never put him behind bars for this situation. Okay, then how do they normally end up behind bars? Brian didn't get away with anything for being cute, and Brian showed more red flags than a Chinese communist rally going on, that he was a shitty boyfriend. Okay. I couldn't charge him. The fingernail thing, the way it was described by and Gabby, even if I didn't clarify it with him, that's not something I can arrest him for unless I lie on my PC statement or omit important facts. The only person I could arrest was Gabby. And the reason to answer your question on why I support you in whatever you do is because it's not my decision at that point in his training. I'm supposed to let him decide, and in the end of my shift, I go and write a report about what I think of his decision. That's the full effect, and I'm supposed to have on him. And that point is to go right. I disagreed or agreed or whatever, as long as whatever he did wasn't insane. That's where he's at in FDO. He's supposed to make the decision. That's where he was, and my job is to show up and be a resource and let him bounce things off me and be present, and I didn't like that I had to even leave him. 23. If you don't feel like the assault meets the code, and if he were to take her to jail, if you would be supportive of that, and if you felt like that was violating her rights, would you have stopped that? Officer Pratt brought up the prior scenario. He talked about sending 100 cops to a call and 80 of them making one decision while 20 made a different decision. He brought up again pushing the envelope and comparing this scenario as being on a razor's edge, and in this type of situation you have to accept that some people might not see things the same way you do, which is why you need a checklist. The world can think whatever they want about policing. This is a gray area sometimes, which is why you need a checklist, and you have to live in a gray area. Believe me, in aviation, no. I'm just saying, I'm not trying to project aviation on this, but it did remove a lot of human error. If you've ever watched air crash investigation, it's something like 80 to 90% of those cases are human error. So over time, how aviation has evolved is to reduce human error. And that's with checklists. And everything is recorded. Yeah, every half an hour though. Anyway, it refreshes every half an hour. Moving right along. That guy might have arrested someone and you didn't agree with it, and it goes to court and the judge and jury and everyone agreed with that officer and found him guilty, and you can still disagree. And in some cases, you could have arrested the other guy and convinced the judge and jury to go with you on your side. Well, who was right? Well, it's not that easy, and I accept that. So would I feel right about arresting Gabby? No, not at all. Okay. Could I see many other cops arresting her? Sure. Could I see other ones not arresting her? Sure. Hey, could you see anyone arresting Brian in any way? No, you cannot see that. Anyway, I have to be grown up enough to say I don't always get what I want. In this case, I would support my trainee in disagreeing with me and making an opposite call because I think it could have been substantiated. Sure, I think he could have totally written his report that substantiated his decisions, so how could I not support him? What I can support is another officer making a different decision than me and then substantiating it well enough to have done what they did that I don't agree with. What I can't support is if they do something that cannot be backed or substantiated. If he chose to arrest her, he could totally justify that, sure. Would I have done it? No. And I hope that my report makes it clear. But Okay, makes it clear why, but obviously it's not like I wrote the report believing that it was going to be an international uproar, or I probably would have made it 5, 10, 15, maybe I would have made a book out of it. Okay, make it now, make a book out of it now. The report, because your supervisor says, hey, don't write a novel on these things. Man, maybe something like this, sometimes it should have been. Clearly, there's a lot of questions about what happened that my report does not sufficiently explain, or you would be like, hey, tell Pratt he doesn't need to come in. I read the report, all questions are answered. You know what I mean? 24. You told Officer Robbins to go full or nothing, or somewhere in between, and separate them. You further added, kind of give them a nod, the wink, like, hey, stay separated, it's up to you. What did you mean by this statement? I told him to tell her that? I told Robbins to tell Gabby and Brian to give them a wink and stay separated? Was I telling him to tell them that it's up to them, or was I telling him that it's up to him? Because I don't remember this. I could see myself telling him that it's up to him, but I could not see me telling him to go tell people they have to separate, like, hey, you guys really don't have to. Now I can see me telling him he can frame it. Here's the real problem. We touched on this. If you're not charging somebody, you don't have authority by law to separate them. So if this is a domestic assault, we have to go all the way, and you have to separate them, and you have to charge them, or one of them. If you're doing that, then you have to. If you're doing nothing, like you're not charging anybody, but you're separating them, what Robbins needs to understand is that's not like something that we can enforce. However, if he can tell that they're not going to separate, and it's important to him that they separate, at that point I would have charged Gabby. If I got the impression that the separation wasn't going to work, like from the get-go, that this is BS, they are not going to separate. I would have arrested Gabby for sure. They needed to be separated. They had to. I can't imagine I was giving him permission to tell them they don't have to. But if he says, I'm amazed, if he says that I'm amazed, I'll go watch it. But I may have told him, hey, it's up to him. Like how you handle it, whether you separate them or don't separate them. Well, I don't think not separating them was ever on the table, but whether you charge them or don't charge on one of them, if you charge a domestic assault, you have to do a no contact order. Okay, but they didn't charge that, and yet they treated Brian like a DV victim and put him in a facility for DV victims. But yet they concluded this was not an assault. Okay. If you could see that, maybe I could give you some insight into it. I'm racking my brain to imagine that I'd ever tell Robbins that he could tell them they don't really have to separate. Maybe it was because Gabby was so upset about separating, and I didn't feel that she was a threat to Brian's safety at all. At this point, I pulled up the video so Officer Pratt could observe his statements. Good job. I can't go back in my mind and know what I was thinking there, but I can tell you this. I like that. Okay, here's the evidence. I did not believe for a second that Gabby was a threat to Brian's safety, and I think obviously history now shows he was a threat to her safety. If the more vulnerable, weaker person was the one at threat, like Brian would beat Gabby, or I was afraid Brian was going to beat Gabby that night, it is important. Starts going off on the phrase, what is it to you? But I don't know where that came from. I know my mindset at the time was she could hit him all she wants. If he doesn't have enough sense, look, if he doesn't want to get hit by his girlfriend and he doesn't have the sense to take the separation as time not to get hit by her, he's a grown-ass man. She's not a real physical threat to him, and now we can see that clearly opposite. I thought he was an emotional threat to her. I thought he was a mental threat to her. I didn't know that he was a physical threat to her. I really didn't. I thought as much as she might hit him or slap him, but there's only so much a 105 or 110 pounds can do to a guy who's 165 or whatever and 5 inches taller. She doesn't have the physical strength to be a threat to him, based on my observations that day. It's not like there was a gun or a knife involved. How do you know? You didn't check the van. Or something where I thought she was going to be a threat to him. And it's like, what is it to him if Brian decides to, behind our backs, go reunite with the girls who's slapping him? She's not a threat to him. So why should we, as other grown men, care so much if he's not got the sense to stay away? Wow. Now, when I said give the wink or the nod, I'm only speculating because I don't know what I was thinking. Like, he can't remember. He's just like, I can't believe I said that. But it's either like, hey, you can go pick up your girlfriend because she's not a threat to you. But you can't say that. You can't tell them you can, you know. The truth is, you can't tell them he can't. It's not illegal. If you're not charging her, then you don't have a lawful right to issue a no contact. So if you want to say it in a way that makes it kind of obvious that you two can get out of here because she's not going to be able to hurt him, that's the only thing I can think of. But I definitely can't, back in my mind, from 2 months ago now, tell you exactly what was going on or going through my mind. I might have been thinking more about the next call I'm going on, just trying to get out of there at that point. But I don't like what I said, no. I definitely don't like it. I definitely think that the mindset I was in, based on that whole conversation I saw, was just reminding him and myself and everyone there, if they end up back together, she's not going to hurt him. It's not like a dude hurting a woman, like what we know happened later. But I must add, more than half a month later. Okay. Except there was actually a history of DV, isn't it? Friends saw him choking her on the grass. I don't know who else saw them fighting. Rose saw that he was jealous and controlling. I don't know. Cassie, his own sister, said, oh yeah, you know, he comes home when he... We still don't know the end to that sentence. Without the ability to have hindsight, Brian just seemed like this really... I hate to say it now. It's going to sound horrible. But he seemed like a mental and emotional bully. Yes, abusers in DV cases generally are. Or abusers in relationships. He just didn't seem like a physical. He didn't seem physical. He didn't. And I clearly missed that huge red flag. Yes. If that was a big red flag the whole world could see, if he hadn't killed her, and they released this body cam to the world and said, what do you think of Officer Pratt's decision? I wonder what they would be saying. I wonder if it would be like, clearly he's going to kill her soon. Unfortunately, yes. A lot of this community, very sadly, has experienced DV. And a lot of you had to turn away from this footage because of how triggered you were from it. And you could see, you even emailed me a lot of stuff, which I asked you to please stop because it was triggering me. Like, it was hectic. To read the details, the signs you saw, the warnings that were going off in your head and what it reminded you of, and then the stuff that happened to you. So it's not the whole world might not see it, but obviously mental health professionals would see it, and people who have been in DV relationships before, yes, they would see it. Anyway, or if they would say, okay, this is the one sentence I might actually like. Or if they would say, he's a mama's boy, and she should have gone to jail. Look, the only thing I like out of this report is that or if they would say, he's a mama's boy. Yeah, baby boy. I mean, we're all doing this with like the fact in our mind that we know what happened later. So it's really convoluted and hard to tell you like anything other than what I thought at the time, which was if I missed a big red flag that he was a murderer, then yes, I missed it. Okay, but if you check the van, his van was full of serial killer books, I'm just saying. That was another red flag. And what kind of weapons did he have? I didn't feel like she was a threat to him, and I didn't care if he ended up with a girl that was slapping him. Because I didn't feel like she was a threat by him. I guess I missed that one. It was one red flag that I did miss. That was there, that he was going to murder her. For sure I missed that one. Or I could tell you, if I would have known he was going to murder her, I would have taken vacation to follow them because I care about people. To the point where he was going to murder, okay, and I would have intervened and citizens arrested him in Wyoming. I would have taken my own time. I would have missed my family to go and do that. I'm desperately fucked over that she got killed. I really am. I would have done anything to stop it if I would have known that was coming. Yes. That time right there, I can tell you, I thought it was silly that anyone would take her seriously as a threat to him, and we need to protect him. And it turns out I was right about that. I just didn't see him as the threat he ended up being. I saw him as an emotional guy. How? He was so cool and calm and collected. He wasn't emotional at all. But okay, I saw him as an emotional guy, an emotional, mental threat to her. Yes. I didn't see him. I thought he was like a mama's boy. Maybe he was a mama's boy. He went home to mama. Okay, I'm starting to like this report. Maybe he was a mama's boy. He went home to mama. Maybe he was a mama's boy. Maybe I'm right about that. Yes, we give you that. You are 100% right about that. But I didn't know I didn't think that guy had it in him. I mean, he wouldn't even take a plastic water bottle. He's drinking out of it. I didn't know, but later I learned he's drinking out of melons. Okay, I'm really liking this. That he did pull over on me. I did not know he was going. Do we even know at the time if he knew he was going to murder her? Did he even know? I mean, who knew? That sounds like an awful excuse for what I said, but that's all I can come up with for what I just watched. Well, no, not premeditated. DV, escalating. With a dude drinking water out of melons. Did you ever see any of the photos that Officer Robbins took? No, I didn't see them. I don't think I ever saw them. If I did, it would have been on after he uploaded them. It should have been on the audit log. I don't recall looking at them. I might have. I told him there are no photos, and that was one of the issues. Officer Pratt asked, there's no footage of him taking pictures? I reply and say, there is footage of Officer Robbins taking pictures, but the pictures were never uploaded and they are now gone. Officer Robbins stated he doesn't know anything about that, but did state that he had a similar issue a couple of months prior where he took a bunch of photos on his work phone. He said he used the software that's approved that is on the work phone to take photos. The software is from Taser. I mean, damn, they've got a lot of softwares. They've mentioned like 5 different names in this whole thing. He said he took video from video surveillance on his work phone and met with one of the people involved in the case. It was a hit and run. And he pulled it up on his work phone to show the individual, and the video was gone. He stated he had body cam footage of him recording the video on his work phone, and it just disappeared. He said it only happened once, and it was around the same time that this incident took place. He said he knew he recorded video, and he used the software he's supposed to use to upload the video photos. And a couple of hours later, he met with the individual to show him the video, and it was gone. He can't explain it and doesn't know if it's a software issue or a bug that happened, but there's proof he took it and proof of him trying to pull it up, and it was gone. Now, he says he took the video and then tried to upload it, which means why is the video footage and all the pictures, it was actually just pictures that Officer Robbins was taking, why is that not on that phone still? Not only did the pictures disappear off the phone, but also disappeared off where he uploaded it to. I find that strange. 26. Officer Pratt called Assistant Chief Palmer and gave a brief synopsis of what happened and said he told Gabby there was nothing he could do as it was all written in statute. Officer Pratt, the last thing I can do is call a supervisor where this is such a minor. This was like a slap fight and injuries from like a fingernail. I just don't know if it's worth the whole domestic thing or not, if it's going to get us in trouble if we don't do it this way. Yeah, I do remember, and I think he's a good supervisor for the way he answered. From what I recall, he pretty much reflects what I responded to. He was like, listen, either it's domestic and you do the whole thing, or it's not a domestic and it's not. But I think he was basically saying, I'm not there and I don't have all the facts you have. That's what you're doing there. So if it's a domestic, do a domestic. If it's not, then don't. And I think that's pretty much where he left it, which it sounds like really solid sound advice. Page 98, 4 to go. Is there anything else you would think is important to know, add, or anything I haven't asked about? I've spent a lot of time going long on answers and kind of wandering into territory that I guess helpful or not answered some other questions. Or maybe it was too much to say, but anyone who hears the results of this case, your investigation, whether it goes one way or it goes the other way, that there's always going to be some people that are unhappy with, and that's a tough position for you to be in. I know I don't know you. Wait, I know I don't know you. But I'm very comfortable based on these were tough questions. They were tough questions. I had to think a lot, and some of them I wasn't ready for. And I actually can't even tell you that I know what I meant. Like for the video back there, I know I envy the position you're in. I thank you for doing it. Whatever you decide, whatever your findings are, I can tell from just the time, the things, the questions you've come up with, you're intelligent, you're smart, you're going to do what you think is right, and I accept it 100%. Are we buttering up the attorney now? What's going on here? One thing that I want you to know, and anyone else who gets the findings to know, is I would do anything to change the fact that Brian killed Gabby. I'd do anything I could. I really would. I accept that if something wasn't done right, I accept it. And if it resulted in, even if it wouldn't have changed the outcome, but it wasn't done right, or even if it would have, I don't think anyone can know that. I accept it. I want anyone involved in this case, or reading a transcript down the line, or hearing this, or whoever, a parent or anyone, I'm not skirting this. It is what it is. I accept responsibility for it, but I don't want anyone to think that I did not care. I have daughters, and I do want anyone involved to know that I talked to Gabby and I treated Gabby as much like I could fatherly, the way I would want another cop to interact with my daughter, even if he got it wrong. I do care. I'm devastated about it, and I'm sorry if the wrong decision was made, but, and I'm not trying to defend myself in saying this, I don't believe it would have done anything to change her murder, except for Brian making the choice not to murder her, but that's Brian's responsibility. My responsibility is that I do what I'm supposed to do. And just like Brian needing to take his responsibility, I'll take my responsibility with whatever the findings are. I accept it. But don't let anyone think I didn't care. I don't even want to complain because, she's dead. Her parents are suffering forever. I'm tiny in all of this, but it is really tough, and I cared that day and I still care. That's what I wanted everyone to know, is I do care. And I don't know how this is going to end for me. Like, I'm not talking about my job. I mean, like, emotionally. It's not easy. And I don't think the public gets that. I don't know if they know we care. I don't know if they know. It sucks. It's more of a comment than anything else. But just so you know, man. Well, I believe so. I do believe he cares. Do you? Additional attached exhibits. Okay, but even though that appeals to my empath, it's still like the empath in me, right? It's just like, oh no, like, he's all torn apart about this and everything. It's still like everything that he said before then is still, unfortunately, a little bit in Brian's favor. Am I right? No one could know that Brian's going to murder her later. It's just that statistically, if it is a DV case, there's certain signs that people saw, right? Yes, it's hindsight, which is, of course, always 20/20, but it's like, yeah, I think a lot more DV training needs to take place. Additional attached exhibits. The following printed forms will be attached following this page. Moab City Police Department Case Report, number 2021-001108. Written statement. Dispatch incident log. Grammar request for dispatch information. Emailed communications. Signed guarantee statement of rights for Officer Pratt and Officer Robbins. All right. Wow. Are we there? I thought there were 102 pages. That's it. 99 pages. Okay. Well, that's it. We made it to the end of that. Well, thank you so much for watching that. It was very, very long. It is unbelievable. Like, I think in hindsight, I wonder if I would have gone through it all like that. I do hope that people appreciate it because, I don't know, man. Is it too much? Should I rather summarize things like this in the future? That's my question. In the future, if we go over cases and they release things like this, should I go over it line by line like this, or should I rather summarize it? Because I'm not convinced which way I should go with this. I quite enjoy, obviously, reading it myself, line by line and word for word, and making sure I don't miss anything. But of course, I could change my approach and summarize it for you guys, chunk it down like I do. I mean, I don't want to make 20 million parts of this, so I could just focus on certain things that were said. I mean, let me know in the comments below what you learned from this, what you're disappointed by, what you're angry about, and what you liked about this whole report. Of course, what I liked was it was like, yeah, he's a mama's boy. I think I'm right about that. Yes. Anyway, so thank you so much for watching. If you appreciate this video, I can't even say liked. I don't think any of us like this. It's hectic. But if you appreciate my effort in bringing you, I think it's 5 parts of analyzing every single sentence, which I haven't yet seen another. Have other creators done this? I haven't seen it. And sometimes it makes me feel like the crazy one, like, oh my word, here I am. They do the logical thing, just like summarize it for everyone, okay? And then I'm here like, okay, we're gonna go through every line and every detail. But if you appreciate what I did, please give this video a thumbs up. If you haven't yet subscribed, I hope that you will. This is a wonderful community of Grizzlies. Thank you so much for being here. And I will see you in the next one, isn't it?